The program will begin momentarily. Please enjoy the following message from our sponsor. Distinguished guests, welcome to the 2023 MICHauto Summit, presented by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. The first session of the program is sponsored by Walker Miller Energy Services. Please welcome the Executive Director of MICHauto and the Vice President of Automotive and Mobility Initiatives for the Detroit Regional Chamber, Glenn Stevens, Jr.
Everybody, welcome. It's good to see everybody. I can't believe a year went by that fast, but we were here a year ago. So thanks for joining us. A couple things I want to get out of the way, a couple housekeeping things. Unfortunately, Professor Masters from Wayne State couldn't join us today. But fortunately, I looked through the roster this weekend to see who was here, and I'm like, just in case I need a speaker. So Mike Robinette's going to sit in for him. Mike, thank you for doing that. And so more value add for you. The other thing I want to do is call your attention to the program, and we're going to follow along throughout the day, and we've got a really packed day for you. But a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, thank you to the sponsors. We can't do what we do. We can't have this event. We can't have it in a great facility like this. And it is a great facility without your support, so we really want to thank all the sponsors. Thank you. And the most important group, and most of those sponsors are right on this list too. If we put all the logos on there, they wouldn't fit. So we started with some of our biggest supporters, but we have over 100 stakeholders who invest in MICHauto team's work. And thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause, because thank you, we appreciate you. Next, I want to thank our board of directors, and that's led by Lisa Lunsford, but we have many of them here today with us. We meet quarterly, but we really talk almost daily, weekly, and monthly with this team. And Lisa, we thank you for your guidance. I meet with Lisa and talk with her. And then Russ Gomer, is Russ here? I know he was coming today. Russ, thank you. Russ is retiring, everybody. So, Russ, you've been a great supporter of MICHauto. A well-deserved retirement, and we wish you all the best. And I have your cell phone number in case I need you. So thank you for all your support. Appreciate it. So let me jump in and set the stage a little bit, but I do want to do a little bit of a year in review and kind of talk about some of the critical things. First of all, our mission from day one, when we formed MICHauto with Tom Manganello and Sabir's in our neighbor's garage, was always been to promote, retain, and grow this industry. It has never changed. We've added the word mobility to the mission statement because things have changed, but in essence, our mission has stayed true for going on about 17 years now. Our focus is pretty consistent with what we've always done too. Convening groups like you, convening leaders, convening students, convening difference makers around the state, working on what next generation mobility is, working on the talent pipeline, and making sure we're advocating for the industry. This is what we do. We're a collective voice, and if you look at the roster of today in the room today, there isn't anybody represented from startups to OEMs, education, government, public-private partnership people. Everybody's in the room here today, and that's what makes our voice strong. So thank you for that. So a couple things about 2023. There's a lot of advocacy work that went on, and Paul Corbett from our team directs that. You're going to hear from Paul later, but probably the piece of legislation that we worked on that I'm most passionate about and I think most proud about was distracted driving. We took a very active role. Many of you in the room were part of that. And this is not just a piece of legislation. This is something that changes lives. So we work with Steve Kiefer, and we work with General Motors very closely, But many of the tiers, many of the service providers, and many of the legislators joined this cause, and this was signed into law this year, and it's already making a difference. We have a long way to go with regards to the enforcement, but let's all try to be part of the solution, right? So that's a big piece for us this year. Yes. That deserves a round. Secondly, 2 reports. The one on the left is on your table. We put this out about every 18 months, but this is the definitive guide to the industry here in Michigan. And I think we have Allison Poth, and Allison designed the cover. She's a student at Wayne State University, and every year when we do this report, we have a different university student design the cover, and this one was designed by Allison at Wayne State. So Allison, thank you so much for your help. And our digital map has been updated. Any resource, any technical center, any OEM assembly plant, any supplier headquarter, it's all on the digital map. We don't go into too much detail because we don't want the folks from economic development in South Carolina and Ohio to come up and mine our data and take you away from us, but it does give a great roadmap of what's going on in Michigan. Another thing that was very significant was everybody knows that this issue of EV worker and EV labor transition is a big deal, as is e-mobility. So one of the things we try to do is not replicate and duplicate others' efforts. So all of these organizations meet on a bi-monthly basis, actually more frequently than that. Drew Coleman of our team convenes them. Almost all of them are in the room today with us. They're all working in a certain lane on this worker and technology transformation, but we're all talking together. And as we find that a new one comes to the forefront to do work, like the Michigan EV Center or Talent First in Grand Rapids, they're tied in. We have them join this group. And we talk regularly, we share information, and I really think this is a synergistic thing that happens, and we're real proud to be able to help lead this. So last year on this stage, the governor stood here and gave us a grant. We had a plan. We knew what we were going to do with it. And I can tell you that our team and our partners have been extremely busy working on this all year. On top of everything we normally do, we layered in all this. Not going to go through it. We had a plan going into this year, but all of these work streams have been active or engaged in and are almost all complete in one calendar year. We have some things we've proved out, which we're going to continue, but 3 studies also help shape this work. The first one was done in conjunction with Richard Florida, and those of you who saw him speak at Mackinac, this was to look at why does tech talent and why do people want to live, aggregate, and build in communities and build lives and work for companies. So we really looked at that. I'm going to come back to the results at the end of the day. The middle one was one we've done every 3 years, and we interview and survey 900 students, parents, teachers, and influencers about the perceptions they have about our industry as a career opportunity. So we executed that again. And we did that to help inform some other work you're going to see. And lastly, next week, in partnership with CADIA, we will be releasing a benchmark study. It's never been done before to look at the diversity quotients and levels at our different automotive companies in our mobility industry. Because how do you know if you're moving the needle if you don't understand what the baseline is? So this study has helped us to do that. We're proud of that, and it's going to be issued very soon. 4 specific things that I want to tell you about is our project with Square One Robotics. This is an important project. This is a Michigan-grown, Michigan-based robotics programs. Listen, we love FIRST Robotics and VEX Robotics, but this is a project and a program we think has a lot of potential, and our goal is to help them double and then triple the number of 150 teams they have around the state. Digital Lakes is a newer organization. We help them with some funding and in partnership to help them launch their micro internship, and I know Jen and Rania and some of the team are here today. In the bottom right, we worked with about a consortium of 8 suppliers and a couple OEMs around a playbook for bringing your engineers into the classrooms. That's another pilot project we worked on. And then one of the things you're going to hear about today from some of the people involved in it is the U-Drive project. This is focused on young people that grow up in Michigan. We want them to move here too, but we're really focused on growing our own, developing our own, finding career pathways for them, and showing them that the combination of a tech career in the auto and mobility industry and a pure Michigan lifestyle work really, really well together. And then throughout the year, we've convened. We've convened in Lansing. We've convened executives at Michigan Central. We had an outdoor innovation summit, again, up in Traverse City in conjunction with Brad Garman and the MEDC's outdoor office. We were at Mackinac. We were at Traverse City for our annual reception. Many of you join us at that. And then the auto show in September with our legislators. So a full year bringing us back here to today. And why are we here today? We really wanted to put a project or a program together for you that address some of the really critical things that are impacting the industry. AI, electrification, hydrogen, manufacturing changes, labor changes, and that talent and the culture for talent. So we built an agenda for you today, and we have lots of networking time, and at the end of the day, we'll have a networking reception too, so we hope you can stay with us. So today, relax, enjoy, tweet if you want, or X, whatever it's called now. MAS23, hashtag MAS23 is the one we're using today, but please share that on social media. It is being live streamed. It'll be available online, all of these presentations on our website at a later date. So thank you and enjoy the day.
Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the President and Chair of the Michigan Strategic Fund, Quentin Messer, Jr.
Good morning, everyone. Can we give it up for Glenn Stevens and the entire team at MICHauto? My goodness, what a tremendous program they do. Give it up for Sandy Barra, my dear friend at Detroit Regional Chamber. Before I get into very brief comments, because Glenn put me on the clock, he was like, look at the clock. I want to give honor. Are there any elected officials here? Any elected officials? Okay. I also want to give, I see up front, my dear friend and mentor, Susan Corbin from Leo. Susan, will you stand up, please? Sue's tremendous. Give it up for her. I see Brittany Affolter came from the Michigan Strategic Fund. Brittany, will you please stand up and be recognized? If there are other members of the MSF, I apologize. And then I see colleagues, I'm not going to name all, from MEDC. I'm very grateful. When I saw New Reality, I was thinking about the sports reality. The Lions are 9-3. Michigan, yes, give it up for the Lions. University of Michigan, back to back to back, #1. Give it up for the Wolverines, even if you're a Spartan. The Tigers, long-term contract with their manager. Good news. And I'm encouraged about the Pistons, believe it or not, and the Red Wings. But on a serious note, the New Reality really speaks to the fact that regardless of what people may say, the future of innovation, the future of how we think about highly advanced manufacturing remains centered in Detroit, in Michigan, really in the whole notion of how we move around. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're grateful at MEDC to just be a part of Team Michigan, because it takes all of us. One of the central things that we're going to talk about, and I'm glad that you can see some of our leadership here, what this says to us is that there's work that's been accomplished, but there's work that remains. And I want to make sure that we all come to grips with what I believe is the central element of really not only Michigan's tale, but I would argue the nation's tale. Manufacturing, mobility is not only important from just an economic standpoint, but psychologically. And I think that our work, making sure that young people understand the creativity, the innovation that is inherent in this, is vitally important. And I'm grateful to all of you for being here and helping push us at MEDC, pushing us within state government to make sure that we protect and continue to push the boundaries on mobility. I don't know whether she's here or not, but we were fortunate enough to have a new Chief Mobility Officer, Justine Johnson. I don't know whether Justine's here, but tremendous leader, multimodal, understands the intersectionality of mobility across multiple different segments. We're also really grateful for our university partners at the 2- and 4-year level, and as well as the men and women of labor. Ultimately, the future, the new reality, is really the same as the old reality. It's about people. And you can't talk about incredible people without talking about Michiganders. Grit, resiliency, a long suffering, there's some value in that. But more importantly, thank you for that, but creativity, problem solving, ingenuity. The big three will continue, as well as Toyota and others who have their R&D headquarters here, to drive forward the future of mobility. There are tremendous things that I could announce, but I want to just make sure that we understand it's not just the big three, it's not just large companies, but it's small and medium-sized companies. It's entrepreneurs who are trying to plug in to this ecosystem, to figure out how they can continually solve challenges that maybe you will have as an OEM or as a supplier, or us as consumers as we try to plug in and make sure that we can charge, and also other propulsion systems as we transition from ICE. So in conclusion, I would say I am absolutely confident that our leadership is here to stay, but we cannot take it for granted. We're going to need each one of us to be open, to be honest, to ask tough questions and to push each other. And you will have a great partner, not only at MEDC, but all of government, not only from the executive branch, but the legislative branch. Thanks very much and enjoy your day.
Please welcome the Chief Analytics Officer at One Magnify, Jonathan Prantner.
Hello, I'm really excited to be talking about AI today because when we look back on this time period historically, this is going to be known as the time of the AI revolution. And I myself have been in this space for about 25 years, I would say. As one of my business partners likes to say, we were doing this back when they referred to it as statistics. And one of the things that really excites me about being part of One Magnify is we're able to bring together kind of 3 pieces to deliver customized solutions to all of our clients. And that is data, analytics, and technology. And there's nothing that summarizes those 3 pieces more than AI. And the thing is, when we talk about AI, it's a term that's thrown around so widely. We have to stop for a minute and think what it is we're really talking about. So AI is a huge area. So when we think about AI, think about it the way that we think of science. Are we talking about a baking soda volcano, or are we talking about space travel? The same thing is true in AI. AI is essentially a system which makes decisions and acts upon them based on data. Now, I would venture to say that everyone in this room grew up with a form of AI in their household, and that's the thermostat. I don't mean a smart thermostat that we adjust on our phone. I mean you crank the dial to 65. Once it hits 63 degrees, furnace turns on, 67, it turns off. And that, in its simplest form, is what AI is doing. It's making decisions based off of data. But more than that, it's trying to replicate human behavior. And so in this instance, what we're replicating is, I'm cold, I'm going to throw another log on the fire. I'm warm, I'm going to open up the flue and let some of the air out. Now, AI takes various forms. And within the automotive sector, there are a few that are really driving things forward. So we have machine learning and robotics. We have computer vision, speech recognition, natural language processing, and generative AI. Now, I group these into 3 different categories, which I consider to be the different revolutions that have happened within AI. The first of those is machine learning, and this has really changed the way in which vehicles are made. The second is the computer vision space, and this has changed the way in which our vehicles interact with the world around them. And then finally, what we're in the midst of right now is really the generative AI revolution, which changes the way in which consumers act and interact with both our brands and our dealerships. So I'm going to touch on each of these briefly and really focusing in on the process that they're trying to replicate. So if we start with machine learning. So machine learning is mimicking the process of differentiation. So imagine you're at a farm. You have fruits and vegetables in front of you. You need to sort them. You're going to do this based on the attributes of what you're looking at. Is this round? Is this oblong? Is this yellow? Is this green? Does it have a hard skin, a soft skin? Based on these things that we can quantify. So these are attributes which are quantifiable that we can turn into data. We then are able to predict what type of fruit it is. We're able to predict based on knowing which type of fruit it is and the size, how much it would weigh. These are the models that have been around for hundreds of years, ever since Gauss first started doing these things to predict the orbit of different planets. But what has changed with machine learning was probably about 10 years ago now, back in 2014, with the introduction of the extreme gradient boosted models. Because these historic models that we had, that we would build things off of, were based on a data set, and then we would fit it to a distribution, and we would go from there. There are certain assumptions that came into this. We would assume, normal distribution, independence of errors, those types of things. But with machine learning, the approach was, hey, we're going to take a step back, and we're going to say, more models are better than one models. So first we went through with this, and we took a look at the approach, which is kind of the random forest model. We're going to grab a subset of data, subset of our variables, build the best model we can, and we're going to repeat this hundreds and hundreds of times. But in 2014, with the extreme gradient boosted models, they took a little bit of a different approach. They said, okay, we're going to build the first model to fit our data as best as we can. Then we're going to look at how that failed. We're going to look at the errors across those and build that next model. And because of all of the advances we've had in computer science, we can multi-thread these things, so we're able to look at more and more data. This has changed almost every aspect of how vehicles are manufactured. Because now we can look at an area, we can say, I know how many vehicles I expect to sell here. Based on that, I also know what I need coming out of my factory. From that, I know when the parts need to arrive. And within the factories, my engineers have looked, and they've been able to determine what is the optimal temperature to weld these two pieces of metal together. Also in the design phase, we can see what are the attributes that customers are looking for. So this led to changes in smart manufacturing, this led to changes in robotics, and it's all because with the excess of data that we have at our hands now, we created processes which allow us to utilize that. The second revolution came about was computer vision. Now, computer vision has been around since probably the 1960s, but it has really skyrocketed over the last couple of decades. And so here we're moving from that concept of machine learning into the area of deep learning. And so these deep learning models are mimicking this concept of perceptual mapping. So let's imagine we have a child that can see, speak, and hear. We're trying to teach them language. So we show them an object. We say orange to get them to recognize that this is an orange. As they go through, initially they're going to mess things up. They're going to see a basketball and say orange, and we add more data to the training set essentially for those children to get them to do that. Because now we're going beyond what is quantifiable in the data, like we had with machine learning, where we're saying this is round, it is this color, it is this size. Now we're looking at an object and we're taking the metadata around that to actually create these models. So this goes into these neural networks and these deep learning models that allow us to make connections level upon level so that we can not only identify what images are present, we can identify what images we would expect to be present so that we can determine what is appropriate in a scene, if there are abnormalities, if there are any anomalies in there. And this has led us to everything that we see around the way that our vehicles are interacting with the world now. When we put on that backup camera, we are able to identify not only what's behind us, but whether that's a shadow, whether that's an object, if it's stationary, if it's moving, and then our cars react on that. The same way that when it gets too cold, our thermostat turns on, we have advanced this so much with these models where now our vehicles can stop for us. This has led to the revolution that we have within autonomous vehicles. It also lets us do things where we can tell if the driver is looking at the road or not. So all of these things built on that concept, and it's replicating that concept of perceptual mapping. Now, where it gets interesting, to me, this is all very interesting, but where it gets really interesting is once we go into the generative AI space, because this becomes even more abstract than what we were doing previously. So within generative AI, it is really focusing in on the concept of sensory familiarity. So the best way I have to describe this is I went on a vacation with my family this summer. Across there, we went to a number of grocery stores. I walked into one grocery store, and I knew it would have the products that I were looking for because it reminded me of a Whole Foods. It wasn't a Whole Foods, it was an independent chain, but there was something about there that reminded me of it. And this isn't that feeling of deja vu like I've been here before. It's just there's something with the lighting, the smell, the way that everything's set up. That's exactly what these models are attempting to do, is to make those connections. And so these use what's known as a transformer architecture. And so it takes a query that we have, so we ask a question, and then it translates that into a vector, and then it compares that against everything that it was trained against. Now, these models are huge. So if we look at some of the smaller publicly available models, like Llama V2, for instance, the smallest version of that is trained off of 7 billion parameters. So it's able to take that data. So if we ask it a question, if we say, okay, I am planning a trip to Jamaica, give me an itinerary, it will look through everything that it's trained against. And the same way that those sensory cues react for us, we're able to do that with the keywords because it's going to say, okay, based on everything I know, give me everything about Jamaica. But if I'm looking at a trip, it's probably not going to tell me anything about Jamaica Queens because it's going to make the assumption that I'm focused on the country of Jamaica. And what really was revolutionary with this is it solved the problem of space within information. Because when we look at the things that we had with natural language processing, if we were to give it a data set to look through and to churn through and say, okay, the store was closed when I went there on Sunday, or I went to the store on Sunday and it was closed, it will be able to identify that, okay, maybe this is a chain that's not open on Sunday. But for anyone that has ever gone to a recipe online in an attempt to just see what temperature you need to set the oven at, first you have to scroll through this entire blog post about the first time they ever had this dish. And so when you do that, and when they say, okay, you know, on Sunday I did this, I traveled around, I did all of these things, and the store was closed. The models that we had before wouldn't be able to make that connection because they were too far away in space. But these models have been able to accomplish that by solving the issue of these vanishing gradients, kind of being able to identify these further connections. And they do that because they have such an understanding of the way that language works. I like to say they would all make our middle school English teachers proud because it starts off with first this, next that, also this, in conclusion that. That's the way it summarizes things. But the real power that comes from this that we see is in taking this information and then turning it against our own data because we're sitting on wealths and wealths of data out there that we're not able to utilize in all times. And unlike those first two revolutions that we spoke about, which were really driven by engineers, right? Because when we're looking at the manufacturing process, when we're looking at, you know, autonomous vehicles, all of these things are driven by engineering. But within generative AI, it's really led by sales and marketing organizations. Because here we're trying to understand language. We're trying to understand not only what people are asking, but what they mean behind it. And that's where, if we look at the ways in which these sales and marketing organizations are using things, the first thing we always think of when we think of generative AI are the chatbots. That's the thing that's front and center. And these are very good at that. There's no question about that. They have a better, richer understanding of language, of how to answer questions. You can provide them with parameters to make sure that they're not speaking outside of what you want to. But beyond that, there's so many ways that we can use this information in the background to really take advantage of things. Because we're able to look and say, all right, I have a new vehicle or a new feature that I'm releasing. I want to write a press release around that. So generative AI is not going to replace the person doing that. I like to say that generative AI is not going to create an award-winning film. It may very well be able to create a holiday rom-com that's halfway decent, but it's not going to create something truly unique. So we still will have people that are doing that. But now once you create that press release for what you want to say, we can use the models to use what's known as retrieval augmented generation to look across all of the data that we already have. So think of all the social media posts that you've done on different channels. Now these models can understand the voice for each of those channels. It can understand the content that you're trying to portray with the press release that you have, and it can replicate that across all of the different platforms so that you have something that's consistent with your brand, consistent with the information you want, but also tailored to each of those. One area where we've seen a lot of impact for this with different customers that we have is really when they look at these things and how they tie in something like search. Because you're going to have your press release, we're going to tie that into a marketing approach. So we're going to have traditional marketing, we're going to have digital marketing, we have teams that are building out those assets. But then we can also take a look using different techniques to understand what customers are saying. So we can see what conversations they're having with each other, we can see what they're searching for, and then we can build out our websites to speak to those characteristics so that they're easy to find. We're also able to use this to say, okay, when we're doing those things, create email campaigns for me. Touch these different steps so that it builds to a certain cadence and so that we can get there. We're able to use this to understand our consumers and where they are in the process. Because right now, if we think about our approach to marketing as it's been historically, we create a marketing plan, we push it out. And there is some adaptive nature that we'll have across there, usually within CRM, because we know more about those consumers. But now we can look and we can go beyond the Markov models and the Shapley value approach that we've used for attribution in the past, and we can use these models to understand what this customer should see next to push them further in that process. Because we're no longer creating segments of 10 groups where I did not walk into that grocery store and have that relationship with it because I'm a male in my 40s. I walked in there because of the history that I've experienced, because of those sensory cues that were there to relate it to another experience to give me a certain feeling. So now when we think about consumers browsing our websites across all the tiers, not only what they visited, but how long they hovered across things, what they focused on, all of that is essentially creating a level of familiarity with that customer that we can then go to bring out unique content to them. And one of the areas with data that I really love is around call center data. Because we all know data is valuable, right? But call center data is something that we have, we transcribe it, we summarize it. A lot of time it ends up sitting in a data lake somewhere. And we may have our agent that classifies things as positive or negative interactions. But we don't really dig through a lot of that data. But with generative AI, we can take advantage of that by having processes run in the background. So the reason I love call center data so much is because it is really a dance that occurs between the agent and the customer. Because at each time the agent speaks, they have the ability to really shift the direction of that conversation, either in a positive or negative way. And so from that, my team uses a concept that they call emotional progression, where we're not just looking at the overall sentiment, was the customer happy, weren't they happy? We're not just looking at the individual utterances to see if that was a positive or negative interaction. We're looking at it as each point in that conversation turns, so we can identify where the key points are that those things broke down or that those resolutions came about. So myself, I live in Buffalo, New York, so if you know 3 things about Buffalo, it's we have wings, we have the Bills, and we have snow. And so from that, heated steering wheels are something that's important. So this is an example of a customer that was looking for a full-size pickup. They wanted a heating steering wheel within that. They were not able to get an answer from the dealer. They could not get one. So they called the call center. They explain the situation. The call center agent also not able to provide any information. Customer gets increasingly frustrated with this. They're like, I really want this vehicle, but this is something that I need. At that point, the agent says, oh, we do have heated steering wheels in these sedans. Like, might you want to buy one of those? Customer's not happy with this. They're like, look, if you can't understand the difference between a full-size pickup and a sedan, why am I even having this conversation? Now, we can argue about whether or not we want the agent to say that. But the point here is that if we think about how we dealt with call center data, with natural language processing even, so with a form of AI, we would go through, be able to create some connections there, use some algorithms to understand that heating steering wheel is a theme that occurs. And then at that point, people can read through all of the different transcripts we have about it. But with this, we can actually create something that's happening in the background, automatic prompts which are running, which says, take all of these transcripts that happened, summarize them into 5 steps for me. For each of those steps, tell me the main theme, the sub-theme, what the sentiment was for that, what the emotional progression was, and then give me a summary of how the call ended from each person's perspective. Bringing out the data in that way, we're able to see so much more that's happening there and take advantage of all of this data to really create those personalized relationships and understand what's going on with consumers. Oh, twice. And so it wouldn't be appropriate if I talked about this and didn't talk about what I see is coming next. So with these different revolutions that we've had, so we had first the machine learning one. And that was really driven by these extreme gradient boosting models. We had what was going on with computer vision, which we went to deep learning in these neural networks. Then we have that transformer architecture, which allowed us to create these further connections that exist within the data to really understand language. And the next part of this is images. And so the image that you see up here is actually one that I created with generative AI. So this comes from DALL-E. And I asked it for a Van Gogh painting of a statistician solving an equation at a chalkboard. I got a pretty good response from this. But when I asked the same thing for a cyborg doing that and didn't specify that it was a Van Gogh painting, it looked like something that one of my children would have done in Photoshop where they just pasted something on top of it. And that's because the issue we're running into with these models are that they're trained in different spaces. So this concept of an image is worth 16 by 16 words. Moving away from those neural networks that we've used in the past and being able to use these transformer models with images, we're actually able to take an image, break it into little patches, and then it uses that same methodology where it's using that sensory familiarity to find pieces. And that's what these are using right now. That's what DALL-E is using. That's what Stable Diffusion is using. But the issue is that it's taking 2 separate models. It's taking our language model to take our query, vectorize that, and then it's taking our images and vectorizing those. But as we know, when we speak in language, it's not the same thing that we see. So what we're doing now and what is underway here is the creation of these cross-modal models. So these are models that use text, language, images, video, audio, all together at once in that encoder and decoder technology of the transformers to create models and create solutions. And so when we look at this kind of going forward, this is the area that is going to change the way that we do things. Because right now we have models which are really good at simulating a conversation. So going back to those chatbots, it's like they can simulate a conversation really well. They can run different processes. But when we think about what these cross-modal models can do, it's more like almost the concept of simulating a dream, because it's bringing together images, thoughts in ways that we don't make that direct connection. It's that same way of walking into the store and just having it feel comfortable. That's the thing that these models are doing, and that's where they're driving to. And so from that, as I stand here today, I cannot tell you the exact ways that these cross-modal models are going to end up impacting our industry, but I can definitely tell you that they are. So thank you so much for your time today.
The next session of the program is sponsored by Michigan State University. Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of Integral, Ashok Shivanand, the Dean of the College of Engineering at Michigan State University, Leo Kempel, the Director of Talent Attraction and Employer Branding at Magna International, Jenny Ecclestone. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome the Senior Director of MICHauto, Drew Coleman.
Thanks, everybody. Let's take our seats. Really appreciate you spending some time with me this afternoon, and really appreciate everyone else coming out today for this really impactful, event. It's really about people, right? All the people in the room, all the people at the companies. When we talk about companies, we often think of nameplates, brands, headquarters, facilities, but behind all of that are the people that create, design, purchase, deliver, manufacture the brand, right? So we want to spend a few minutes talking about the culture of talent and why that matters. So I'll start with Ashok. If you want to say kind of who you are and what you do and how you define culture, we'll start there.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Drew. Ashok Shivanand. I'm the CEO of Integral. We work a lot with especially automotive and financial services companies with transforming towards being technology companies, so towards mobility or fintechs. And you asked about how we define culture. So I think this took a while for me to come to. This is the first time I started a company. And as the founder, your default role is the one that has to establish the culture. And I had been lucky to read the Netflix culture deck, which I would recommend you Google. And I wanted to, when I started a company, say, hey, I want to build something like this. And I completely underestimated the level of self-awareness, introspection, testing, validation that goes into coming up with a deck like Netflix did. And so if you'd asked me this 6 years ago, I'd have a different answer. Now I'd say it comes down to two things: your values, who are you, and your principles. How do we work and how do we treat each other? And taking those values, in our case, it's humility, accountability, curiosity, and kindness. And it's making sure that you're implementing that day in and day out. Like, our interviewers are asked about, hey, how did this person do on humility? How did they do on accountability? And we do that part of the survey before asking about how did they write code. And so that way it's really ingrained into the culture from the beginning. The interviewers are validated. And then when we give feedback, if someone has to be put on a performance improvement plan, it's also kind of provided that way. If someone's given positive feedback, it's given in the lens of our values. And just one tidbit I'll leave everyone with is that one of Enron's values was integrity. That was on their poster. And so, I don't know if they necessarily used it in their interviews or not.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really important, right? It's not just putting it on the nameplate, right? So how do you integrate that into your companies? Leo, a little bit of a different space for you.
Yeah, I'm kind of the supply side of this equation. And so I agree with Ashok a lot on those two concepts, but also want to talk about teamwork, because most of us in academia, the way you learn K through 12 and beyond is individual accomplishment. Who remembers after a test wondering, did I get an A or a B, right? And so you're used to that, but when you go into the real world, when you go to work at places like Magna, you're part of a team, and so learning how to work within a team is very key to us. And the way we do that is a lot of team-based work within our courses, but also experiential education. And so one of the most important things for us in the college in East Lansing is to make sure our students get early and often experiences working with different groups and companies, different companies, trying to discern their path in life. And I see Garth Machenbacher sitting out there. He's the key person for us in terms of having those connections with companies, so that when we train students for their future work life, they're ready to go from day one.
Great. Thank you. So Jenny Ecclestone, I'm the Director for Talent Attraction and Employer Branding at Magna, and I think both of you have set up what I'm about to say very well, but I think it is a combination of those things. So every day my role is to kind of protect the brand of Magna and make sure that we are delivering on our employer branding message. So that message is dream big with us and join our team. So taking so much of what you guys have talked about, and it's rooted in our core values, which are being collaborative, thinking big, never settling, and taking responsibility. So those are the things, like you mentioned, Enron, they had integrity, but they didn't have that accountability piece. So being responsible is one of those things that we hit right up front. And so when we think about how we're bringing talent in, we're trying to track those people who are aligned with those core values. And with that employer value proposition I'm giving them to dream big with us, the fact that they come in and one of our values is to think big still and to never settle and always be thinking about those next things and how we move the entire mobility industry forward. It's so much about delivering on that promise we're making, right? Because then it's when you get that gap that people are feeling either they don't fit in there or this wasn't what they signed up for, or all of a sudden there's something that's misaligned with their personal values, and then that impacts the entire company's culture too.
Yeah, and Jenny, your company has tens of thousands of employees all across the world. How do you maintain that kind of overarching culture across your brand?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, and especially not only just working in all these different locations, but what those cultures can perceive those things to be, right? So we actually rooted ourselves in an employee charter years ago that all was the foundation of who Magna was, the principles that we followed. And so these core values are kind of an evolution of that, but we see ourselves as that partner within the automotive and mobility industry, bringing everything forward. And at the end of the day, our goal is to always deliver on those products or those things that we're producing that are gonna be able to move the industry forward. And so much, because of so much of what we do is also rooted in those core values, delivering and never settling and all of that stuff. I think if you're not doing that day to day in your work, then it's not a company that you'd want to work for in the first place. So every day we're asking you to do those things. If that's not aligned with your own core values, then it's not going to be a fit. And so for us, we retain those people and we keep the people and attract them, hopefully, to us because of those things that we're doing and because they know that the work they're doing every day is hands-on. It's they're able to see it in the marketplace and what they're able to do.
And yeah, go ahead.
So something that we had to go through the learning curve about this was very much in service with that. It's on leadership and it's on the company to make sure that we're doing service of it, right? That if you're going to be interviewing folks and letting them know what your culture is like, that when they come on the inside from a recruiting standpoint, that recruiting turns into retention.
Yep. And
and those folks have chosen in part to work there, not just based on compensation. Y'all probably know better, like that doesn't fall super high in terms of like the millennial and Gen Z rankings in terms of importance. Culture and values are a big one, and learning is another one we can get into. And I think in our case, we debated and hummed and hawed about this, but if you go on our website, integral.io, and the careers page, we just put the values right on there and what it means. And initially, it was kind of scary because we're like, hey, we're giving our interview candidates the cheat codes. And then I was lucky to get some really great advice of like, hey, when they join your company, you're going to be giving them all the support and enablement to be successful. So why not do that even before they join?
Day one.
And then, everyone's going to have a different definition for jerks or someone who doesn't fit in there, right? And putting this on your website will allow those folks to self-select out and go work for a place where their behaviors are valued more than they would be over here. And then who's defined as a jerk becomes like a culture by culture, company by company thing. So I think it's advertising it leads to a lot of value, but it also puts a huge accountability on leadership and operations to make sure that we are staying in service of that brand.
And Leo, Ashok talked about some of the factors that potential employees really position, right? Compensation, culture, location, other variables. Are you seeing a change in the students that are going through your programs, decade over decade or year on what they prioritize?
Well, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we're in Spartan Engineering, we're laser focused on helping build the economy here in Michigan. So we work with the companies very closely and find out what attributes they're looking for in those employees, and then make sure that those experiences happen throughout the 4, sometimes a little bit longer time that they were with us. So yeah, but the students are looking for an ability to make a change in the world and to make a change in the world here in Michigan. And so, you know, the most important part for us really in the end comes down to deep engagements with companies and internships, co-ops, and other activities like that where they can really learn that discernment process of where their path is. Because some will have a path of a small company that's a new startup with that culture. Some will have the path of a larger company. And realistically, over the years I've seen they do tend to split off a bit. There are people who are made for the small startups and very aggressive go, and there are some who look for that continuity, that belief that they will be part of something that's been around for 100 years and will be around 100 years later.
Yeah, so Leo, you're preparing these students and young people to make that leap into different types of environments that are really driven by culture, as we've talked about. How do we as companies prepare to receive that talent, right? You know, there's a perception, I think, of inflexibility in some of our cultures, or maybe some latency in some of our practices. So like, how as companies, or you know, maybe the companies in the room, how do we position ourselves to say, yeah, I want that top talent from Michigan State, but I don't know how to receive it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. If Bernadette Friedrich, or also known as Dr. B to most of us who's here, she would tell you the most important thing is to have really meaningful experiences when the students are with you, whether that with you is a short period of a few weeks, because it's that type of engagement, or whether it's 6 months on the co-op. Yeah, it really has to be meaningful. You have to give them real work to do, that they feel like they've done something that they couldn't have done at a university, and that without the opportunity that the company gave them, they wouldn't know about. They dream about it, but not know about it. And so, you know, the old days when I was a student, back in the days that we used chisels and abacus to design things, some of the co-ops were less than exciting. I distinctly remember as a second-year student really knowing absolutely nothing at that point except how to solve an integral, maybe, sometimes. You know, they gave me an assignment. Oh, it was deadly boring. It was deadly boring. And the thought I had is, if this is what electrical engineering is, I'm going to go be a lawyer. And then I did one more assignment, because you rotate. I think it's very important to rotate, to try different things. And then I got into something I couldn't believe. First, I couldn't believe they were paying me to do that. Right? That's the kind of job you're looking for. You can't believe they pay you to do it. And two, I couldn't believe they were letting a sophomore in college do this kind of stuff. They really shouldn't have, quite frankly. But it was really fun. And so now that got me excited and interested. And what I found as I went on through those rotating experiences, that, you know, the stuff I really liked doing was going to require a master's or a PhD. So school got a lot more serious at that point. I will tell you, my grade point went like that. At that point, and that's what gave me the chance to be here today. So, you know, those early experiences really form the person, and that's why it's important for the employers to make sure that it's meaningful, it's challenging, and when the student leaves at the end of that period of time, they've learned something.
Yeah, and
I've got a very relevant experience to this. So I went to school for electrical engineering. I was a little bit better at the integrals, which is why I ended up naming the company Integral. I had a co-op at a General Motors Suzuki plant.
You know there's software to do that now, right?
You know what?
So make sure you know that.
There's something nice about pen and paper and doing it old school. One of my internships was at a GM and Suzuki plant.
Yeah.
And at the time, they built the Suzuki XL7 and the Chevrolet Equinox, the Pontiac Torrent. And it was one of those internships where they needed someone to make sure that the systems are working from a software standpoint. But sooner than later, the folks that are showing enthusiasm are given a little bit more. I was given enough responsibility where I shut the line down for 8 minutes. Right? And this was when gas prices were really high. We were even running Sundays. And some things, though, that I learned with respect to the culture that I didn't recognize at the time that are an obvious trend amongst the younger workforce. I got to work on the plant building software, which meant that the folks I was building the software for were folks that I got to go talk to all the time. Yeah. I took that for granted. This is my first kind of real job that I had. And I could walk across the skywalk, go to the plant, and ask them, like, hey, why are you building this? Why are you asking for this? And I didn't realize I was doing human-centered design. Yeah. I would show them like a very thinly mocked up image of what it's going to look like and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Is that what you're thinking? And they say, no, that would never work. And again, I was doing like lean product iterations, and I had very direct access to the customers, and they intently chose for us to sit there on plant instead of in kind of the GM headquarters in closer to Toronto. And these are factors that come into play that matter a whole lot to driving retention for your talent, where, hey, why is the problem that I'm solving today important outside of the technical importance? Because it's easy for us as technical folks to feel really proud about a creative solution to a technical problem, but nowadays, folks are wanting to know, okay, well, if I solve this correctly, then what? What does that matter? And I think some of that stuff is really hard to measure, especially with the level of precision when you come to automotive tolerances that we're used to. But over here, you can have plus or minus 20%, it's fine. Or you could even just have qualitative anecdotes that your customers say, and you bring that back to your team, and that gives them dopamine for the next 2 to 3 months about, hey, I'm gonna come back and solve this next big problem because it might have this kind of impact. And then if you're with me on this, do that in the beginning. Before you start the engagement, before you start this initiative, get at least video recordings of whoever is having the pain that justifies the budget to put towards this project to solve the problem. Have them record an audio if you can't have your team meet with them, and just have them kind of lament on why it is that this needs to be solved. And you will be surprised about how much the crinkle in their eyebrows, and when they really get mad about something, how much more charged up your team is, and it costs you very little to do this, compared to like a retention bonus or other things that you may have to do reactively to try and keep that talent there.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you want to find errors in code, hand it to the boss. They will do things the developer never thought a person would ever do with that. And that's how you learn also.
Yeah. Hi, Jenny.
No, I was going to say, I know where the conversation started was about kind of how we get the talent that you're creating, obviously, at a school like at Michigan State into these companies in consideration. And I think a lot of what you both have talked about is exposure, right? And that's the key thing. And I think Magna's in a very unique position, being a very large company and a global enterprise, but we're very unknown in the area. So many people have probably walked by our building or seen our Magna locations all over the place. There's 25 of them in southeastern Michigan, so we're everywhere. But people don't know what we do. They don't know who we are. So that's part of my job, is to say who we are, what we do, be approachable, and there's lots of different ways that we do that. One is, obviously, we're big partners with Michigan State University, go green. Yes, my fellow Spartans in the room. But I think the other piece of it, too, is that we're aligned with organizations like Digital Lakes and participated in their micro-internship program this past year, which was kind of the first program of its kind in the area, where we took 24 students from various Michigan schools, or outside of Michigan, but Michigan-based students, and exposed them to 9 different companies over the summer. And so these were really short-term micro experiences meant to expose them to all of these different companies. So we participated along with General Dynamics and HAP and a number of other companies, but what we were trying to do was help everybody understand this greater ecosystem of technology and innovation that's happening in Michigan, and that you don't have to go to Austin, you don't have to go to Silicon Valley, you don't have to go to these places to work in innovation and in tech. It's happening right here in your backyard. And so I think that exposure and understanding what is actually going on and what both of our companies are doing and how we're influencing this space is huge, because the students just don't see that. They understand, they see Apple, they see Google, and there's nothing against those companies. We work with all of them. But to understand those tangible things that they can do working for companies like Magna is something that I don't think is on their consideration factor until they get that exposure to us. So that's
Jenny, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So having moved here from Canada, you work for a Canadian company, effectively, right?
Yep.
That internship that I talked about, my company, my salary was virtually free for them because of a tax write-off, right? And so I'm curious to know, because I'm sure Magna hires a bunch of co-ops in
Yes, we do.
Ontario as well and takes
We do.
advantage of the same program. As an employer here, it's been a lot harder to facilitate those internships,
Yep.
especially for a small company like ours, where the risk associated with hiring someone out of school is not necessarily offset the way the government of Ontario did. So I'm curious to know
Yeah.
if you've seen stuff across the border. I'm sure there's a bunch of people over here that can try and make some changes around that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's spin that a little bit and just talk about some of those transactional things that we need to work on here in Michigan. So let's bring it back to Michigan. You know, what are things at a company level that, like, if we want to accept this talent and retain this talent, what do we need to do differently? You know, we talked a little bit off stage about just the process that a new hire goes through can be nauseating, and that's going to really turn them off to even get that exposure or that opportunity. But then also on a policy side, right, we have state, federal, local programs. So I guess, you know, we've got about 5 minutes left. Let's dig in a little bit on like those transactional pieces. What can we do as a company or as a state to position ourselves? You mentioned the Digital Lakes program, and we ran a study earlier this year talking about tech hubs, and that story's not quite there yet. So I think we need to harness that a little bit and change somewhere across that process to better position the messaging here in our state to drive those students here. We talked a lot about exposure, but let's say the exposure works, what's the next step?
Well, I think, you know, Digital Lakes is a great example. I know the MEDC also has different programming that they're doing from state funding, which is great. So it does help a lot of those smaller companies who don't have the means or like you said, the cost ROI analysis isn't there to accept students in. So I think that there's those types of programs where as a partner you get access to participate in something like that. And so that's one way in, and there's definitely representatives around the room here to be able to talk with you about that. But I think as a whole, it's coming back to, and I'll use Magna as an example, obviously, because that's what I do. But I think some of it is the representation we have on campus. And so we do have an incredibly strong partnership with Michigan State and a number of other universities here in Michigan. And what that does is we can't always bring students in, right? So there's a limited, as much as we spread our wings and as much as we want to bring everybody to the table to have those experiential moments with us, it's just not possible. So how can we bring that to the students on campus? So we're showing up at career fairs, but also, like Leo mentioned, we sponsor a number of different student capstone courses. And so that's a way for us to integrate in with those students to say, okay, here's a real world problem for you to solve that we're dealing with every day. Then they get that exposure to Magna, but it's part of their education. It doesn't have to be something that they're now taking the time. It's a much lower budget item, I would say, to be able to solve for that. But I think there's lots of different ways to be creative and be able to bring yourself and the technologies you're bringing and all the cool things that you're doing for the industry into those spaces and still expose the students without having to do like a formalized co-op or internship program.
For sure.
So, yeah.
So from our side, I thank you for your sponsorship. You know, those are very important for companies to be on campus often and early in students' careers. But we're also doing things to really morph our programs over time because the world changes quickly now. One thing that we're doing is we're working with companies on designing new majors that will very specifically hit the needs of the employers here in Michigan. Judd, our Director of Mobility, announced this morning that we've started a partnership for a autonomous Indy race team. So students will be involved in racing autonomous cars around the Indy 500 track at up to 200 miles per hour. So that's, again, something to get them interested and engaged in the kind of things we're trying to do. And I'd be remiss sitting up here to not mention the investments by the state that are very important to us, and in particular their investments and hopefully more investment in the Engineering and Digital Innovation Center we're planning on campus, because we're going to take our 7,000 students in the College of Engineering and grow it to at least 8,000 in the next few years. And we just need to have the ability to train them so you all can hire them. Pay taxes, bring them in more money.
Yeah.
Keep the engine going there.
I think for me, there's this concept of feedback loops. I mentioned
Feedback loop,
values
yeah.
and principles. And feedback loops are something that come up in conversations often, especially in Michigan. We're historically an industrial state, and we have made things that require a lot of upfront design and then very efficient manufacturing, a lot of orchestration between that. It's very different for software. We can place small bets, and the feedback loops are the critical part to that, where it's not a set it and forget it mindset anymore. It's, I think this is right. How do I know it's right? How am I going to check if it's right? How can I check as quickly as possible? What's the least amount of money I got to put in to find out? What's the least amount of time? And if this concept comes across everywhere, when it comes to talent retention too, we're used to, generations before myself, an annual review. I got used to like twice a year. And now, like the poop sandwich of like positive feedback, the critical feedback, and then another positive. For millennials, I think Gallup did a study that you can do up to 7-to-1 ratio of bread to meat in that sandwich, and that's kind of what's expected. So look for ways to provide feedback and look for feedback both in the contributions of your team, so you can share that back with them and they feel growth and connected in the work, but also in the work itself, so you can place bigger bets knowing that, hey, we've got this data system, we've got the system of checking that's gonna catch it early if some of these small bets are not gonna turn into big goals. So that way I can dream really audaciously and play small ball to get there. Yeah. So really think about the feedback as you're transitioning out of industrial into more software.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate all of your feedback today. It's really brings us back to people, right? That's what our industry is driven by and what's going to drive us forward. So I think we're in a great position to move that needle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jenny, thank you so much.
Leading the world in mobility and clean energy means inspiring our young generation. And UDrive the Future is leading the charge in mobility. UDrive launched in September of 2023. In just 2 short months, we have inspired thousands with our young professionals to explore opportunities of mobility right here in Michigan. With over 2.5 million views across all Gen Z social media platforms, UDrive has an audience that's doubling each month, driving engagement, curiosity, and inspiration across our community. Follow UDrive the Future and get inspired by what is possible right here in Michigan.
Please welcome Community Manager at Google Code Next Detroit, Nando Felton. Apprentice of Controls Software at Intech Automated Controls, Caroline McDade. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome the co-founder, producer, and host of Daily Detroit, Jer Stays.
All right, everybody. So it's a little different for me. I'm a podcaster. I'm used to having a table in front of me and like a big stack of paper. So I apologize if I'm a little off. Caroline, Nando, great to see you both. Let's talk a little bit about why you've chosen Michigan. Let's just start there, let people get to know you a little bit.
So I've chosen Michigan, actually. I'm native to Southeast Michigan. I've grown up here my entire life, and I've always loved the state, but I kind of found myself, I think as a younger child and in my teenage years, kind of taking the state for granted, not knowing what I wanted for my future and thinking, I could end up anywhere. The possibilities are limitless, but I've found myself staying in Michigan because my family is here, because the career opportunities are spectacular, and I'm very happy and content with the career that I'm pursuing right now. And I also love the nature of the state. I love the Great Lakes. I love the versatility of having a metropolitan area and the suburbs and rural areas all within tangible reach.
For sure. I mean, as anyone knows about our weather, you can travel the world in like 15 minutes around here. For you.
Yeah, I think I couldn't have summed it up any better, but essentially for me, it's a sense of community and belonging. So as a kid, I grew up here in Michigan, and I was inspired by so many things: to be a designer, to be an artist, to be a creative, and to where I'm at now in my role, being a community manager for an amazing program. Essentially, it's like a place that I wouldn't want to leave. And for me, it's a place I didn't want to leave behind as well. Essentially, going back into my community, reaching back to people that helped inspire me, but then reaching back to people that I need to bring up as well. So essentially, for me, being in Michigan is that sense of community for me. Just wanted to stay here, seeing those inspirations, and how can I build more of those?
For sure, for sure. Now, Caroline, there are a lot of misconceptions or preconceptions that people have when it comes to working around automation or automotive or anything related to that, right? Because Michigan is a place that builds things. So basically for you, how did you decide that this was going to be your thing? Because what you do now and what a lot of people do in these industries now is a lot different than what happened or people think about when they look at old pictures at the Packard plant or something like that. It's a very different industry and world now.
Certainly, and I was actually one of those people with misconceptions up until a year and a half ago. I was kind of fumbling around in my college journey, and I don't say that to talk down on myself, but just in a way that I was very insecure in where I wanted to head with my future. And I kind of felt like a very typical kind of example of, I think, the struggle that Gen Z tends to kind of go through when they're finding a career path is just this overwhelming choice and not feeling secure in where you're leading yourself. So I actually ended up hearing when I was at Macomb Community College about a program through MTech, which is their workforce and continuing education part of the campus. And it was this 3-month program to become a controls technician, is what they kind of the encompassing title for it. And I decided to go for that because I needed direction and I needed something that would give me confidence in my ability to learn again after coming out of the pandemic. And that's exactly what the program provided for me. And then I headed to the company that I'm at in tech right now. And I continue to learn with them every single day. And I continue to just hold such a high amount of gratitude for the learning that I'm able to get. And as far as kind of those misconceptions in automation, I guess it depends on what misconceptions you're talking about, but I think there are misconceptions as far as that either you need to be extremely educated or that if you don't see yourself as traditionally educated, that you can't fulfill those roles of people who are traditionally educated.
Your story makes me think about the importance of on-ramps, because you're right, like college isn't for everybody, or a 4-year program isn't for everybody. And so I think your story can really help with showing people that. And also I think it's key for employers to understand that too, to look at the individual talent and find that and do the work to kind of unearth it, right? Look more than just at like a resume site or something like that. Now, Nando, with you, you do educational work and you're also a community manager. Let's talk about first your journey to being a community manager. What called you to do that?
Yeah, so I think I backtrack a little bit. So my first year at the University of Michigan in undergrad, for the first years actually, I studied mechanical engineering. And one of my dreams was the Packard Automotive plant to one day turn it into a place for, how would I call it, a new place for terminology of mobility. Like how do I turn this place and help change the future of how transportation is looked at in Detroit? So that was always one of my goals growing up. And as part of my undergrad, I became published 3 times. I was a scientist doing advanced solid-state battery research, and I interned at Ford Motor Company for 2 summers. So I think my misconception is that I had all these amazing gigs, you could call it, but then I changed my major to education. And I remember my parents were like, wait, what are you doing? You want to be a teacher? And I was like, yeah, kind of, but not really. I want to be a professor one day. But for me personally, I realized that if I could do these things, then why can't anyone else do these things? And for me, I saw more of the importance of doing the work, being in front of students, finding ways to help expose students and inspire them and build the next tech leaders of tomorrow was way more empowering than for me sitting time in a research lab at Ford Motor Company, which was it was a dream come true, and I did it. But for me, I found that my space in this place of work is to be the one that actually pushes people to become whatever they want to become. And for me, it really started with representation as well. Seeing someone that looked like me. If I look in this room right now, there aren't a lot of people that look like me. And so for me, it was how do I reach the community and reach the youth and show them, hey, I can do it too. You know, sometimes we might be inspired by superheroes or comic books or video games, TV shows, or the sound of a V8 roaring down the street. But for me, really, it was all those inspirations and then wanting to give back. And I wanted to optimize my time. And I realized that when I was working in engineering, I was spending a lot of time on projects, which for me was amazing. I was helping Ford redesign the way, it's been a couple years now, so I guess I can talk about my work, but redesign the way that the batteries that we're working on are processed and to make it more optimal. And so it was amazing, but I got home and I wanted to still give back to the community, and I really didn't have the time or the capacity to do so. So now I'm here where I'm at, being a community manager, helping not just hundreds, but thousands of students in Detroit, and hopefully across the country, help inspire them to become whatever they want to become and to find those dreams and passions and to move forward in those places.
Well, I can definitely agree with the professor vibes. I think you've got that down pretty well.
Thank you.
So how important is it for the both of you, especially as people are getting into their careers, to be able to sample different things? Because you've both tried different kinds of paths.
I think it's extremely important to kind of figure out what could be out there and what you could want. I mean, to be honest, I'm still at a point in my career where I am sampling things. I'm figuring out where I want to head and what I want to do with the education that I'm currently giving myself through the job that I'm in. I mean, I want to be a programmer. I love the programming that I'm doing, but the different aspects of my career that could lead me to are so vast that I'm kind of on that journey as we speak.
Yeah, and for me, I think that's the importance of education, is being able to pick up a pencil, pick up a pen, pick up an iPad, a tablet, an Arduino, a Raspberry Pi, whatever that might be, and then see where you want to be in life, not just right now, but where do you see yourself in the future. And for me, I remember in high school, I had an amazing opportunity to be an intern at Shinola, where I was a watch designer. So I had that like kind of in my tool bag, and I love Batman, so like kind of like Batman has this tool belt of really unique things. So I kind of put that in my tool belt. Okay, maybe I have a batarang right here, but now I know how to design a watch strap right here, or to create a wallet out of leather right there. And so for me, that sampling thing is really important, because a lot of times students aren't exposed to a lot of stuff. I didn't work in a lab or learn how to code until I got to college. So I didn't even know that's something you could actually become. I didn't know that you can become published at 17 years old and work alongside scientists, not just in your university, but at a huge company like Ford. And so for me, being able to reach my hands and try things and test things to see them before I actually decided to make that my career is really important.
I love both these stories because I think it will help show other people what they can do, right? They need to be able to see themselves in order to succeed. And I think about my previous life, I worked around staffing, and sometimes when you hire people, it needs to evolve and kind of show you where their best fit is, not just in their lives, but also in the organization that they're working in. Because you get to know somebody after 90, 120 days, whatever, you can start to fit them a lot better into the puzzle of whatever you're doing. So we're here talking about UDrive, and I'd love to know how the two of you got involved with it. So, Caroline?
So I actually got involved in UDrive. I was contacted by a representative of MICHauto. I guess I had been recommended through the program that I went to at MICHauto, and they were looking for someone of an apprenticeship style position, someone who is still on their journey. So that's how I became a part of this campaign, but as soon as I heard about it, I got really excited to be a part of this opportunity, because it really is just showing people who they can be and what they can be. We have two different types of careers in this field that we're exemplifying right now, whereas Nando, I'm so sorry, is showing us the higher education side, whereas I'm showing something of where I kind of come from sampling. The reason that I'm in my career is because I was kind of sampling through this program, and so I'm just really excited to be here and show this generation that they can take a leap of faith and they can be a part of these careers, and it doesn't have to be something so overwhelming and so far out of reach.
Yeah, and for me, some of the work I was doing with a former scholarship I had, the Detroit Promise, so I was working with the Detroit Regional Chamber trying to figure out some ways that we could program together, and I was reached out to by someone on the team, and it kind of transcended from there. And for me, this role is really unique. It was really cool being a part of UDrive the Future and still being a part of it, and just seeing like its inception of it just being an idea, and then to being Caroline being brought on to help to be a part of this social media campaign. It's really cool to see students that I've engaged with like comment on our posts and comment on the channel. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things I've noticed throughout my career is that the importance of following through on a mission, not just like a company mission, you know, you fill in the blank thing, whatever. You got to move past that to something that's authentic to you. And backstage, talking to both of you, it's more than work for you. It's about using that work to help people and do different things and contribute to the community. So I think for both of you, why don't we kind of walk through that? Because I think that's really crucial, that mission-driven work goes beyond just, you know, someone was joking earlier about, you know, Enron and integrity or something. people, and I don't dismiss it as just people being young. I think it's important. I've seen this change happen from X to millennial as a geriatric millennial myself. But this is something that's truly part of it because, look, we've all been through a lot of stuff in recent years that we realize that our time we need to use wisely.
Yeah. So I guess that for me, I am still, every single day, I'm kind of trying to figure out how to use my time wisely, who I want to become, what those long-term goals are for me, and I do know that that does involve community impact. However, I'm at a point in my career where I'm learning every single day. Everything that I am kind of doing is, I'm actually benefiting from the people around me. I'm learning from the generations before me that have been in this field for far longer than me, and I'm trying to kind of daily form my views on what I think and figure out how I want to impact this field, who I want to be, and right now is just, yeah, that kind of like intermediary transition phase where I'm just trying to soak up all the information I can like a sponge so that I can help people and impact people and become an important part of this.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like I'm on this continuous journey to seek knowledge and to learn. Today is actually my last day of my graduate studies at the University of Michigan, so after this I'm going to go present on my research I did, and essentially,
yeah, give this guy a hand.
I'm not sure if I can raise or talk about some starking topics, but I'll just share with you guys really quickly about my mission and what I'm working on for my thesis in my grad school, and that's essentially around the media's perception of gun violence in Black communities. And so I saw on the news today that this is almost the first time in almost since 1950 or 60, quote me on that, since the homicide rates have been at the lowest. So for me, you know, that's amazing, and essentially doing work to find more outlets, to build more STEM playgrounds, to build more playgrounds in general for students to have an outlet for their expressiveness and not just choose violence. So for me, my mission is that continuous journey, and I plan to take that with me as long as I'm able to, you know, stand in front of a stage like, or sit in front of a stage like this, or be in front of a place like this, and to have an impact is always continue that mission to learn, and to learn not just with my own narrative, but how do I learn culturally? How to learn to assess myself in different demographics, learning to have empathy for teaching from people that come from different cultures and backgrounds. So my mission continues.
Yeah. You both talk a lot about learning, and I think that that's something that is lifelong. Like if you care about your career, you're always going to be learning something new because things will always happen, right? Change is going to happen with or without you. You just have to make a choice on whether you're getting on board, okay? Like my job did not exist when I graduated high school or any of that stuff. And so for both of you, when it comes to learning, what about sharing that are those goals that you're going to have throughout your life, you think, to always be picking those kind of things up?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I think that stagnation within my knowledge is something that I would never like to see myself do. I would like to always have my perspective shift as I incur new information, whatever that information may be. If it's more information maybe about my community and the world that I'm living in and how I'm impacting everything around me, how the technology that I'm working on, maybe if it has a negative impact, I don't want it to. I want to figure out solutions, problem solving. I want to keep innovating, like keep learning so that I can keep innovating and be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, and I feel like for me, my life wasn't always a straight and arrow-driven path. And for me, I've taken a lot of non-traditional routes or approaches, especially like education, and telling my parents and grandparents, no, I'm not going to be a teacher, but I'm going to work in education and my degree's in education. So taking that non-traditional route and approach into now being in a place where I'm evolving the idea of technology and education and blending that together, I think for me is kind of answer the question, yeah.
Earlier we talked about Michigan being a very special place and having all these different things. So what are one or two of each of yours favorite Michigan moments in your life or things that you've done recently?
I love just the access to the Great Lakes, personally. I I'm a big nature kind of person, which is why I never saw myself going into technology. So I love going to Holland, and I've never been to the Tulip Festival, but I would love to be. But I love the access that we have, and then I feel so fortunate too. So I kind of live in the suburbs, but I live around some really great parks that I can go on runs through. And so even if you've been on a computer all day, and then you have 30 minutes before it gets dark, and then you're like, I'm going to use this 30 minutes to go on a 3-mile run, and the serotonin that brings is so necessary, especially in a Michigan winter. So those are my favorite parts.
Well, this time of year, that break happens at lunch, because.
Yeah, fair enough.
Nanda?
Yeah, for me, I think there's hundreds and thousands of Michigan moments for me, but honestly, it's just we're around the holidays right now, so for me, it's always great to be around family. Spend that time with family, doing fun things, maybe going up north to a cabin or going camping. So for me, it's like Michigan has like the best of both worlds. If you go all the way to like the west side of the state, there's like sand dunes, so you can like kind of say like, hey, I'm on a sand dune right now, riding around in dune buggy. So it's pretty fun too. I've done that a couple times, so
that's awesome.
It's fun.
That's awesome. If you were to talk to somebody else, like one of your friends, like one of the best ways to get the word out about something is by word of mouth. Sure, advertising works, all those other things, but word of mouth, it's trusted, right? So when you're going to tell to someone else, like, hey, you can do something here, you can be a part of this, you could be a part of, the automotive industry, you could be part of making whatever, because Michigan does so much. What would you say to your friend about it? What would you do to encourage them?
I like to speak from what I know, so that oftentimes comes from my personal experience, and that comes from saying, hey, let's take a look at the opportunities that you have. I found a program personally that was very niche. I didn't have much of an idea of what I was getting into until I really delved in and did the research for myself. So I would say, hey, I'm here as someone that you can talk to for support. I would say also that while paving a path for yourself and trying to figure out the opportunities that you have in your community are very important, I think confidence in yourself is also very important, which sounds like such an obvious thing, but I think we all forget it so often. I mean, there were so many times where I was going through interviews and I was kind of telling myself no before other people had the chance to tell me no, and that's something that I still work on. I don't want to do that. I don't want to see other people doing that. I want to see people with full faith in their abilities to bring the best of themselves forward that they can.
Yeah, I like how you help speak people to their truth and their power. That's very cool.
Yeah, not that I talk to my friends like the students I work with, but for me, when I think about designing certain curriculums, I look at the inspiration. And so we're in Detroit. A lot of us think just Motor City, but essentially Detroit is a place, and Michigan is a place where so many things have been spearheaded and taken initiative to be created. One thing working with Michigan Central is being a part of New Lab as well, and just seeing that there's tons of tech startups in one place, which is like a couple miles down the street from here, and just seeing that inspiration. And for me, essentially, that's what I would tell my friends is like, I know a lot of them have left after college to go elsewhere, but staying in Michigan and having the ownership and realizing that this is like one of the coolest places to be right now.
Sure. Caroline, what's something that you thought you knew a few years ago, but now know differently?
Okay, sorry. You can be a person in the workplace. I love that. It's such an important thing to me, and I think it really does kind of, I suppose, depend on your working environment, but I feel so eternally grateful that I'm in a working environment that's really supportive. I can make mistakes. I can learn from those around me. I feel comfortable having conversation with everybody that I work with. It's a very kind of family environment, and I hope that that's what people find in their careers as well, because I like coming into work and feeling comfortable laughing with my coworkers. It brings levity to the day that just working would not be the same without that. So I like that you can be a person while you work, and I think that's kind of one of the most important parts of being able to work and keep going and keep having motivation, keep your humanity.
Yeah, and for me, it's learning that these big companies, organizations, a lot of times we think about these big names and big brands, but honestly, it's the people that are within the company. And for me, that really does tend to make big things a lot smaller and make it feel like a family. And also that I didn't need a tech degree to work with Google. So that's something I learned too.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's pretty cool. So when we're back on the stage, to wrap up here, when we're back on the stage together in a few years, what do you want to be talking about?
I think for us, Caroline and I were a part of a, how do we call that? We were working with a few hundred students in Detroit at the Lexus Velodrome, and it was a kind of a part of their STEM Science Fair Day. And a lot of students had sticky notes, and they would think about ideas on what they thought mobility or transportation looked like in Detroit. And so for me, it's just, how can we answer some of those questions? How can we potentially see flying cars down Woodward? How can we see more economic mobility in sense of like buses or trains or flying boats? It's kind of like this idea of the kids' inspiration and their imagination coming to life. I think that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I also want to see the kids that we're talking to, the people that we're interacting with in person online. I want to see them become a part of this conversation. I want to just open up the doors to everybody possible that might have a perspective that they feel is valuable. So I want to be talking about this conversation in a way that says, wow, we had so much success bringing in that younger generation with You Drive the Future. How can we replicate that? Or what did we learn from that?
You know, what I love about all of this is that, to me, and it's an old proverb, but I think we all should plant seeds to grow trees whose shade we will never sit under. So I think that's important. And we gave Nando a bit of a hand, but I think we should give both of these a hand as we're out the door here. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Please welcome the Director of Government and Community Affairs for MICHauto, Paul Corbett.
Hi, folks. If everyone can come back inside, take their seats. I'm thrilled to see so many of our friends and colleagues here, folks that we work with and collaborate with on a daily basis and help us advance the MICHauto mission and do the work that we do. And in that spirit of collaboration and shared mission, I have the privilege today to recognize 3 individuals with our Partner of the Year Award and Volunteers of the Year Award. So to start, Barb Land is the Executive Director for Square One Education Network. Barb has been working throughout this last year with Drew Coleman and some of my other colleagues at MICHauto as part of MICHauto's High-Tech Talent Initiative. Barb has been integral to this work in no small part because of her passion for connecting young students to high-tech talent fields and helping them realize the potential for a career in those fields. So please help me welcome to the stage the 2023 MICHauto Partner of the Year, Barb Land. And then we have 2 more gentlemen, John Kerr and Steve Hilfinger, who are the co-chairs of the MICHauto Advocacy Committee. Both of these folks are people that I encountered myself when I started at MICHauto years ago, and are among the most supportive, kind, smart, and handsome gentleman that I've ever encountered. And so, first of all, I just want to say about John. John is the embodiment of just a phone call away. He is incredibly helpful to me, supportive, and has incredible insight as a site selector expert, and his keen insights have been incredibly impactful towards our advocacy efforts when we go to make a policy to keep Michigan competitive. And then Steve Hilfinger. Steve is senior partner at Foley Lardner. He has been a strong champion for MICHauto and an even better friend, always there, always willing to pick up a tab, and a great guy. So please welcome John Kerr and Steve Hilfinger as our 2023 MICHauto Volunteers of the Year. Oh yeah, we're doing it this way. Steve?
It's always good to do that.
Thank you.
Please welcome the plant director of Factory Zero at General Motors, Kathy Steelgrave.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. What a great event. Myself and some of my team were able to join, and we're really excited and grateful to be here today. This seems like a great group of people, few familiar faces in the crowd, so I'm excited to tell you a little bit about what General Motors is doing just down the road at Factory Zero, and a little bit about myself along the way. So we are just, I think if it was clear outside, we're just down the road. I think you could see our smokestack on a clear day from here. So we're just around the corner. And we've been up to a lot. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our overall growth strategy, a little bit about myself, our transformation at Factory Zero, previously known as Detroit Hamtramck, a little bit about what it means to build an electric vehicle, and then how General Motors is helping accelerate EV adoption within the community. So you may be familiar with our vision, zero crashes, zero emission, and zero congestion. And I am so fortunate as the plant director at Factory Zero to be able to contribute to this vision on a daily basis with everyone who works in our plant. It's not just something that's happening in the front offices or in the boardroom. This permeates all the way through our entire plant to every person who works on our site. So a little bit more about us and who what we do. Actually, first, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I do wear many hats. I am a third-generation GM employee. The picture you see up here in the upper left, the black and white picture, the man in the tie is my grandfather. He's a World War II veteran. He was actually a medic in the behind the market garden front. He wasn't on the front line, but a medic working behind. And when he returned from World War II, he got a job in Pontiac. I'm from Waterford, so he worked at Pontiac Motor for his entire career. This picture is from his last day of work. My dad happened to be a general foreman in that same complex in Pontiac, so the man in the snazzy trench coat is my father. And he, at the time, again, was a general foreman, and he was able to have a very good career. He, as a child of an hourly employee, was encouraged to go to GMI, now Kettering, and earn an engineering degree and make a very different life for myself and my siblings than the life he had growing up. And for that, I'm very grateful. And then I'm the plant leader, so if I look back on my career, I've worked in manufacturing since 1995, so that's a long time, right? Almost 30 years. Always in a plant, always very active. I heard the people who were presenting just a bit ago talking about what motivates them and what gets them going. And when I reflect on what motivated me when I was young, I loved math, I loved science, but mostly I loved people. And I had no idea, my dad knew, I had no idea that through his encouragement, go work in manufacturing, you'll like it, you'll like it. He was absolutely right. The problems that I solve, the people that I encounter and that I get to lead every day. It's really motivating, and the fact that I've been able to achieve what for me is an absolute dream job. And in my opinion, the best job in all of General Motors, by the way. I am so grateful. I'm also a mom of 2 teenage boys. Everybody's taller than me now. They're 15 and 17. I'm a problem solver. I'm an engineer. I graduated from the University of Michigan. Mechanical engineering, thank you, yes. Hockey maven, thank you for the word that my team helped me pick here. Every year, GM and Ford, we've done an outdoor game at Clark Park to benefit Clark Park and the Matrix Theater in Detroit. It's a charity event that we do. I've played hockey for many, many, many years, and when people ask me how it's going, I say not well. I'm not good at it anymore. In my mind, I'm still really good. It's hard to heal, is what I learned, you know. But hockey's a game where you fall down a lot and you get back up and you keep going. So it's a great way to prepare yourself for working in manufacturing. I'm also a mentor. I belong to several employee resource groups within General Motors. This picture happens to be from GM Women, but I also support our GM Veterans, our GMAN, our African Ancestry Network, GM Plus for LGBTQ plus and allies as well. And then I'm a breast cancer survivor. And the fact that I can stand here 8 years after the fact and tell you that, thank you. I appreciate that. 1 in 8 women, or 1 in 7, depending on what statistic you read, are affected by breast cancer, which is why it's so important to get all of your proactive checks done on a timely basis to have a good, positive outcome. So that's a little bit about me. I wear many hats. My days are very busy, as I'm sure many of yours are, but they're also fun, and I enjoy my life very much. So Factory Zero, it opened in 1985, and it splits between Detroit and Hamtramck. The city line goes right through the body shop of our plant. It was rededicated in 2020 as Factory Zero. As of today, we have about over 2,000, about 2,300 employees come to work at Factory Zero every day, and we do have the ability to grow. Currently, we're building 7 vehicles, and we're assembling the battery all under one roof. So it's a lot of activity. There's a lot going on. And we've had a tremendous amount of investment, over $2.7 billion since 2013, and 2.2 with the investment in 2020. There we go. So these are our products. The first was a GM Hummer pickup truck, followed by the Hummer SUV below here, and then the Chevy Silverado, which there's different versions of the Chevy Silverado that we're building, the GMC Sierra, the Cadillac Escalade IQ, which is my personal favorite. The Cruise Origin is assembled at Factory Zero. Then we have 1 additional vehicle that is not yet announced, and the Ultium battery pack is made in our battery assembly area. And part of our advantage at Factory Zero is the fact that our people have been with us for some time, but the new equipment that comes in is where we can take what was good for us with the people at General Motors and apply it to the new equipment. So since our investment, we have a completely new, just new plant. Everything was removed from the shop floor all the way down into the wiring, the old phone lines. It's all gone. All new equipment was installed in the body shop, the paint shop, general assembly, and in the res department. So it's over 4.5 million square feet. It's all under one roof. We have the largest body shop in North America. The building was expanded. If you had ever visited it or seen an aerial picture of it, the building was expanded through 3 of the sides. And there's new technology throughout the plant in each department. And it's a brownfield site. It's not a greenfield site. So we get asked that frequently by investors. Why? Why would you make that choice? Well, there's a few reasons. One, where this plant is located, our plant right in Detroit, we're right in the center of it all. You know, it's easy access. We have the flow in and out from the highway. We already have all of the utilities set up, all the permitting done with the states, with the cities. So in this particular case, it was the right decision for us to do this brownfield site. Plus, it was a third of the less capital. So in a capital-rich industry such as the automotive industry, it makes sense for us to save a little bit on capital and use this site that was ready for us to transform. All right, so now I want to bust some of the myths about ICE vehicles and electric vehicles in the assembly plant. This is a common question for me, and maybe you heard it or read about it in the last several months in some other media, that what is the difference between EV and ICE? If you're going to build an EV, does that automatically mean you're going to need less people to work there? And the answer is no, that is not the case. So, I mean, I know because I'm living it every day. In a traditional internal combustion engine plant, you will have a chassis line, you'll have an engine line, you might even have a transmission line, depends on how big that plant is. I don't have any of those, but what I do have is a whole rechargeable energy storage system or battery department where there are people that are making that battery. Now, are the people's hands in the battery? No, there's a lot of automation, just like there is in any body shop that you go to right now, because any job that is dangerous or degrading for an employee or dirty for a human, like you don't want a human doing this, it has been automated over time, and we continue to do that as an entire industry. Certainly as a company, but as an industry, we will continue to be productive. But it's not the fact that it's an EV that means that there's going to be less jobs there. So I just wanted to bust that myth right away. The pictures here show you some of the differences of the decking. So you'd call it where the chassis and the body meet. You might call it a decking. That's what I've always called it. In our case, we don't have that same type of decking situation. We have the battery that comes up underneath, and you could say that's the decking aspect of it. And then the tires and the drive units come up separately into the vehicle in the chassis area. So I just wanted to take some time and let you know that there are still plenty of opportunities for people to work within General Motors at an EV plant and at Factory Zero. All right, accelerating EV competence. So this slide, again, one of my favorites. On the left side, this shows GM's current market share, a few months old now, but you can see where it's at in the center of the country, where we have a heavy, strong market share. On the right, the map of the states with where we see EV growth. So as a company, as General Motors, it makes sense that we are spending our time to invest into the EV market to gain greater market share, while we maintain ICE vehicles for our customers that are building them, enjoying them today as we continue to build them now. We also are working on other aspects for our all-electric future. So how do we get people to charge at home? What agreements do we need to have? How do we work together with the communities that we live in to make sure that people are eager and willing to adopt an electric vehicle? So home charging is available through our Ultium partnership. Our products you can choose to get an Ultium charger, a level 2 charger with a 220 outlet that you can plug in at home to charge your vehicle at approximately, for me, for the vehicles I drive, it's about 12 miles per hour. So for me, I use that when I go to my father-in-law's cottage. I have that with me. We plug it in. I can get a few miles at night that way. We also are partnering with certain industries such as EVgo and pilot gas stations to help with the accessibility of chargers within the existing infrastructure of our highway systems within the United States. And then at home charging, so we do have capability coming with our products to be able to power your home and use your vehicle as a generator through GM Energy, which is one of our GM departments. So a little bit more about me and my experience driving an EV, driving the EV that we build. I have a Hummer truck that I've had for about a year, and I have a home charger. My husband's actually an electrician, so it worked out well for me to get that home charger installed. Yeah. We also, at General Motors, have chargers at all of our workplaces. So the picture in the middle here is several of us who have company captured test fleet vehicles that we plug in and we can charge for free at work every day. This is open to all of our employees. So we have employees that have their own purchased EVs that are able to park in this preferred parking area and also charge their EV for free at work right now. So for me, like I don't have to do anything special on a regular basis to charge my product. I charge it at home, I charge it at work. It's all good, it's all easy. I mentioned the kids. I had to take my son to a hockey tournament in Niagara, and I didn't know how I was going to work that out, but come to find out, across the 401, all across Canada, almost every exit, you can get a level 3 charger and charge very quickly. So you plug in, you go eat, come back out, and you almost have a full charge. I was a little bit skeptical when I first signed up for this vehicle, but I'm so glad that I did. It's amazing to drive. If you've had a chance to drive one, I'm sure you'd agree with me that the way that the go pedal reacts as you press it, the torque is unlike any other product I've ever driven. So also at our plant, at Factory Zero, we have worked with our employees to get them into our products, to let them experience that. We also very much spend time empowering and on our culture and bringing people up to improve themselves and to improve their own career as they grow in their career. So we have invested a lot of money into our plants, but we also give all of our employees the opportunity for tuition reimbursement. This is both a represented UAW employee and our salary employees. We have something called Workday. Maybe some of you also use Workday. It's available to all of our employees. So our UAW employees can apply to any job that any non-represented employee could also apply to. So say someone has a degree in something, but they're not really sure where they want to go with their life, and we're hiring. They join us, they get to know what we're doing. Maybe they're working in production, but they have that opportunity to use the tools available within our company to grow who they are and grow their career. We also hear from our employees through employee surveys. Well, workplace of choice is very important to us at General Motors. And our senior leaders are often visiting us and giving us good cultural moments to motivate our teams. We also have a great regular dialogue with our local UAW leadership. If anyone here has worked in a union plant before, it's just part of who we are. We're used to it. Our relationship is very human at the plant level and very productive and constructive. But we work together with both the plant and the greater company overall to have an impact in Detroit and in Hamtramck. With over $50 million in commitment to nonprofits, this includes some community-based organizations. We built a playground not too long ago. We invite people in for tours within the plant, and then we've also supported home ownership. And then when we want to look ahead for our next generation of talent. So at Factory Zero, a saying we have, it's where teamwork meets technology. We have had opportunities. I mentioned we've had opportunities with some of our teams to grow, but I mentioned how the picture of my grandfather on his last day of retiring, his retirement day, the woman in the upper left, Carmen, she actually retires this Friday. It's her last day. And we had a diagonal slice meeting where she worked for 25 years as a production operator, and then her kids were grown, and she's like, you know what? I think I want to be a skilled tradesman now. So she signed up for the apprenticeship program and worked another 25 years. She has 50 years with General Motors, another 25 years as a tool maker, and she's going to retire this coming Friday. So we're excited for Carmen. Some other pictures you see here, the picture on the far upper right is a group of new apprentices that we have, people who also worked in production that became apprentices. And then the picture of the two women on the bottom, two of the ladies who work in the plant. So Iveta, who's one of our team members in quality, and then Monique, her daughter. Monique, when she graduated from high school, wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do. She started working in production, did it for a few years, got her degree, and she was one of the people who used the access into Workday to apply to a job in quality, a salary job, and she now works in salary in our quality organization. So I listened to the presentations earlier about people trying to encourage working in technology, and I just want to encourage anyone here who may be mentoring someone to pick a career that if you like people, if you like problems, if you like being a part of something greater than yourself, working in manufacturing is a daily reward for all of those areas. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that I've gotten to work at Factory Zero and in all of the other plants I've worked throughout my career to have interacted with people and grown in such a way. That's it. That's it. So, thank you.
Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give it up for Glenn Stevens and the MICHauto team. Great day today. So I'm really excited about Joe and John, who are about to follow me on stage here. But before we bring them on, I wanted to give a little bit of the Detroit Regional Chambers. After all, we are the Chamber of Commerce for the leading automotive center in the world, and MICHauto, about our view of EVs, and use a little bit of data to tell a story. So first of all, let's start really big picture. Right now, the US, well, we're really not considered a leader in EV adoption. But I think what we can say is either by hook or by crook, the industrialized world is moving to electrification. And we have a choice to either be the leaders in that or the followers in that. And this is a region that leads and not follows. But the sky is falling. I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. That's where I came from, and my job kind of requires me to do that. And then when I talk to members of Congress, and of course, as you see in the media, oh, EVs are faltering. Just in the last 6 months, right? EVs are faltering. Well, there's a little problem with that because the data doesn't support that. Even in 2023, which is the last bar on this chart, you're seeing strong growth in both BEVs and plug-in hybrids. Growth is still occurring in the US market for EVs, regardless what you might think or what you might want it to be to fit a political narrative. And then the other thing I hear is, oh, those are all just Tesla sales. Well, sure, Tesla is the leader, there's no doubt about that. But look at the change in Tesla shares just since the pandemic. They've gone from 80% to just a little over 50%. So it's not just Teslas that are being sold as we grow the EV market here in the United States. So why are we seeing these stories? Well, there has been certainly a proliferation of really incredible EVs, and Kathy from General Motors just mentioned some of the cool, really cool ones that are being built right down the road here. But we've gone from 12 models available to us as consumers just 2.5, 3 years ago to over 40 today. So what we're seeing is, in my humble opinion, a momentary blip in supply meeting or not meeting demand. In other words, we've got a little bit more supply right now, especially as supply chains have eased, to what the demand is for the moment. When we turn to looking at our backyard here in Michigan, we look and we see, well, geez, not only is the United States not necessarily a leader in EV adoption, Michigan, as one of the 50 states, is not necessarily a leader within those 50 states. And I point this out to make a point, and that is EVs have become a political issue, which is wrong. This is a business, this is a technology, this is an economic issue that is particularly important to the state of Michigan. Our polling, the Detroit Regional Chamber, we do a tremendous amount of polling statewide with the Glenn Gariff Group, and some of our polling numbers are truly, truly discouraging. Less than half of Michiganders say that they support the industry shift by our Detroit 3 companies to electrification. But more challenging than that is the huge political divide. It's almost as if Democrats and Republicans live on different planets on many issues, but EVs have become one of the biggest issues in which there is a seemingly insurmountable political divide. I mean, look at these numbers. I mean, 70% of Democrats support the shift, 20% of Republicans support the shift, and when you ask the question more specifically about would you be willing to consider an EV as your next purchase, you see these similar disparities. And if we are going to compete and win in the next generation of mobility that we started and won 100 years ago, we have to get united as Michiganders. And it's hard to lead if you don't have followers. Here's another stunning number. Only 18%, less than 1 in 5, Michiganders believe that the shift to EVs is actually being driven by consumers, by market forces. 18%. So 71% think it is just government mandates, or my favorite, pressure from environmentalists. Now, I'm not sure how many people out there really know how business works, but usually making a profit, not appeasing, an interest group is the primary motive. And so let's get serious. EVs, regardless what particular government official might want to say or does say, they're not for everybody right now. They, frankly, may not be right for all applications at any time in the foreseeable future. But what's interesting to me, and especially as I talk to political leaders in Washington from all states, from all parties, it seems really interesting that they view the world of electrification as a static model. That all we have and what the EV market is going to be is what we have in terms of range, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of adoption. So, oh, these aren't going to work. You know, because, and I'm really glad that some of these people weren't around when, you know, we introduced the first mobile phone, which had to be hardwired into our cars, made them mobile in a sense, but not really mobile like the way we have it today. Or I'm glad they weren't around when the first computers were introduced, right? This is a rapidly changing market, and the fact that so many people have a static view of what the technology and what the use and the use case is for EVs is absolutely stunning to me. And just look at, even if you took all that away, take away the future improvements that are going to be made in electrification, look at the use case today. Take upper middle class and above households with multiple vehicles who live in some kind of housing, usually a single family house, that has the ability to have a level 2 charger in your home. Think of how many families fit that general description. How many millions of people fit that description? If you have multiple cars, one can easily be an EV, one can easily be a regular ICE vehicle, and you have that home charging. Think of that untapped market with just the vehicles that we have today, with just the technology that we have today, and we know that is moving ever, ever rapidly. And finally, regardless if you or the people you talk to, especially the political people that you talk to, don't like EVs for whatever reason, right? And Lord knows I've heard some strange ones. The fact is that not only is the world coming, but particularly China is coming. On this screen is a Chinese EV that frankly is of the highest tech, has terrific range. I think it's a great looking vehicle. In fact, there's some incredible designs coming out of China, and they're selling from anywhere between $25,000 and above. And guys, they're building them in Mexico, which opens them up to NAFTA. So we can either prepare for this or we can pretend it doesn't exist. My suggestion is that we lead. Thank you.
Please welcome the host of Autoline, John McElroy. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of Auto Forecast Solutions, Joseph McCabe.
I wasn't sure.
Coming across. Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody way in the corner there and everybody way in the corner there. First off, I got to thank MICHauto for putting this on. What I love is hearing all the different speakers that come and the things that they're doing. I always leave any of these conferences, anything that MICHauto is doing, far more optimistic than I came into the room. So kudos to you guys. And also, thank you, Sandy Barua, for the perfect setup to, I think, what Joe and I are going to talk about. I'm going to talk, I don't know, I haven't timed myself, I'm guessing 4 or 5 minutes on this new EV reality check. Then Joe's going to get up, and then we're going to do the sort of tag team thing with 1-minute answers to questions that are being flung at us off the screen. But first, let's get into this whole EV reset thing. Let's go back just 2 years ago. Just 2 years ago. There was a feeding frenzy on anything to do with EV. Wall Street was going crazy about it. All these new startups were hitting the market. They were all doing IPOs or SPACs, which got them into the market even faster than they ever could have gotten into in the first place. And the market capitalizations of these companies were staggering. They had never built one vehicle, and they had market caps bigger than GM or Ford. Extraordinary. And everybody had this idea that they were going to be the next Tesla. Or investors thought, I'm going to invest in the next Tesla. I'm going to make all kinds of money on this. And it was FOMO all over the place, the fear of missing out. And so it kicked off a feeding frenzy in the stock market and with all kinds of investment going to anything electric. That was then, just 2 years ago. Let me quote you, as of yesterday, the stock price performance of these cars, or car companies, the startups. Rivian, down 78%. Fisker, down 90%. Canoo, down 96%. Lucid, down 89%. Nikola, down 89%. Arrival, whose shares hit $359 2 years ago, are now trading for $1.30. Bollinger bought out. Lordstown Motors, bankrupt. Electric last mile delivery, bankrupt. But you know what? To me, this was completely foreseeable. I write an op-ed piece for Wards every month, and I want to read to you, just a few minutes, not even a few minutes, an article, an op-ed piece that I wrote in 2018. And it went like this. Over the next 3 to 4 years, more than 100 BEV models could go on sale, up from 12 today. This was 2018. They will attract some attention, but once most shoppers look at the sticker prices or discover the monthly lease payments, they'll move on to something more affordable. Since automakers are mandated to sell specific percentages of BEVs or face fines, they'll be forced to offer big discounts. They will lose a lot of money. Dealers will be reluctant to order more BEVs because they don't want to get stuck with slow-selling models that need massive support from the factory. Residual values will plummet, as we've already seen happen with BEVs, because there's even less demand for them as used cars. Anyone who purchases a BEV will be horrified to see how fast it depreciates. And because residual values determine lease payments, the lease rates on new BEVs will shoot up unless the factory runs in to subsidize them and lose even more money. Meanwhile, the media will pounce on how much money the car companies are losing on their electric cars. They'll run stories on how BEV sales are missing their targets, and they'll discover the abysmal resale values of these cars. It won't take long before most of the country believes BEVs are a bad choice and best avoided. I wrote that 5 years ago. I don't think I would change one word today. So where are we today? Sandy set it up beautifully. EVs have become politicized. The Republican Party is in fact making attacks on EVs part of their talking points going into the presidential election next year. And they're getting an audience for all this because for a lot of people, this just sounds right. Number one, they don't believe in climate change. They think EVs are stupid, and they think the government's trying to shove it down their throat. They want nothing to do with them. And sure, look at what's going on. Ford Motor Company is the only one that publishes its EV earnings, or lack of earnings. Ford Motor Company is going to lose $4 billion on its electric vehicle program just this year. And they're not going to make money next year, and not going to make the money after that. Now, I give Ford a lot of credit. They're the only automaker with the guts to publish their earnings on electric cars. Everybody else is losing billions too. They just don't publish the numbers. I guarantee you they are all losing money except for Tesla. Even so, I'm actually a real proponent for EVs. I believe there's a bright future for them. It's still the early days. So, like it or not, EVs will be the future. You know, Mary Barra was speaking to the Automotive Press Association last night, and she told us in the media, and I like the way that she described it. She said, when we come to EVs, we're just entering the first turn of the first lap of the race. She said, well, maybe the second turn, not even the first lap. She says, EVs are the end game, and you want to get there as fast as possible. So that's where the industry is right now. It's a race to manufacturing scale. Because once you get to scale, you turn the corner, and everything looks good. And you know, a rule of thumb in the automotive industry is you have to reach at least 80% capacity utilization in an assembly plant to be profitable. Rule of thumb, it varies, right? But once you go over that break-even point, every unit you build is pure profit. And that's when these plants become real money-making machines. Remember, and most people don't realize this, or they've forgotten it, or maybe they never knew it, Tesla lost money for over a decade. It lost billions of dollars. The one thing that they had going for them is Elon could pick up the phone and say, hey, I need $2 billion more this afternoon, and he'd get it like that. Nobody else has got that capability of raising that kind of money that fast. But Tesla did not turn the corner until mid-2019. And when I looked into their numbers and when they became profitable and never looked back after that, it's when they started building 80,000 EVs per quarter. And it turns out that that's about the time when the Model 3 really hit line speed, mid-2019, and they were building 50,000 EVs a quarter, Model 3s, and that's when they turned a profit. So that's about 17,000 a month, roughly speaking. And so that's where I think the bogey is for the rest of the auto industry. You've got to be able to sell 17,000 or 17 to 20,000, let's call it, a month of one model from one plant. You do that and you'll start making money on EVs. And Tesla has shown it's become one of the most profitable car companies in the world. So help is on the way for the industry. We're really still in the early days of EV models. We're not going to see the legacy automakers be able to build vehicles that are really capable of competing with Tesla until around the 2026 timeframe. That's when we're going to have software-defined vehicles developed with digital twins that have got an electronic architecture that is zonal and centralized computing and all the other things that Tesla's already been doing, the legacies are not going to catch up until around 2026. And that's when I think things start to look really good. In fact, GM just came out the other day, the CFO, saying that by 2025, they're going to cut the cost of making their EVs by $25,000 per vehicle. That's a staggering announcement from GM. Now, that includes getting ZEV credits too, so it's not just pure efficiencies. But it's also good from the US standpoint, and Sandy Barua alluded to this. It's a national security issue. We've got to be able to, as the United States, make all these vehicles and use the raw materials ourselves from here. I attend the SAE's North American International Powertrain Conference every year. I'm the only media person that's allowed into it. And what the experts said, so I'm using this is not my opinion or anything like that, listening to the experts, by 2027, 2028, the US will be able to build all the batteries and electric motors and everything needed for EVs with 60 to 70% of the raw materials being sourced in North America or from our allies. Now that still leaves us a chunk where we're dependent on China, but that's a massive acceleration in terms of being able to source the raw materials that we need. Also, the EV charging infrastructure is going to be far better than it is in just a few more years. Tens of thousands of chargers are just going to be added in the next year alone. So I believe the hockey stick inflection in terms of sales of EVs in the United States will probably happen in the 2027 timeframe, somewhere around that. That's when I think the average consumer will say, you know what, I think an EV, that just makes a lot of sense for me to go out and buy. By 2030, I happen to believe, and I'm just pulling this number out of thin air, but I think it's a good guess, 1 out of 3 vehicles sold in the US will be electric. Now, that's not the 50% that the Biden administration's been talking about, but I've always felt this 50% was a stretch goal. You know, if you ask for 50, maybe you get to 30, but if you ask for 30, you're not even gonna get to 30, so you may as well ask for 50. And so 33% market share by 2030, that's about 5 million EVs, I think is a pretty good number. So what about those people who don't believe in EVs, think they're stupid and want nothing to do with them? How do you change them? Yeah, we need well-designed cars, we need EV cars. We need them in different market segments at different price points with different styling needs and different needs of different peoples from different brands and all that. But I think the game changer is going to be what they call bidirectional charging. That's where you plug your car, electric car, into a socket at night, and you fill up that battery with cheap electricity, and then you go to work, or maybe you stay home and you leave it plugged in, and you sell that electricity back to the utility at high demand times during the day. Now, there's been other studies done about this, but they think that EV owners could earn up to $1,500 a year by arbitraging electricity, buying it cheap and selling it high. And when I think everybody starts to learn that, wow, I can make $1,500 with this electric arbitrage, maybe an EV is really what's right for me, because I can essentially, not including insurance and maintenance, all that, but from a pure fuel standpoint, I can drive for free. And Joel, now it's your turn.
Oh, man, that was good.
Thanks, John. Always high energy start. It was just fantastic. So I'm Joe McCabe. I'm President and CEO of Auto Forecast Solutions. Little background, we forecast the production of every single vehicle built worldwide through the end of the decade. Every single month, powertrain detail, you name it. I've been doing this for 25 years. So we do the so what and the why behind the data. And what I love about my job is I don't have an agenda. I don't make an electric motor and I don't make an internal combustion engine. So I'm not going to try to sell you on what I think. You might see it with the slides, but we have to be agnostic. We have to tell a story that tells what our customers, mostly automotive suppliers and stakeholders in the industry, how they should be planning their business today and in the future, because at the end of the day, everyone has to make money in this job. So I'm going to throw a bunch of slides at you. I'm going to bring the empirical part of the story to it, and then we'll sit down for our discussion. But I first want to talk about the 4 hurdles of EV adoption. And I call them hurdles and are not barriers, because as hurdles, they can be scaled. right? And this is sort of in order of operation: cost, range, infrastructure, and raw materials. And there's some pros and cons bullets on each one of these. Number one, the cost gap is there. That's number one. I understand this idea of saving the universe one BEV at a time, but when there's a $15,000 and $20,000 gap between the BEV variant and its ICE brother, that's a difficult pill to swallow. This is in COVID times. Money's not 0.9% financing. We have really tough economic situations right now, and convincing a consumer to buy an electric vehicle right now with a cost differential is their biggest hurdle. However, during COVID, with the reduction of inventories, every manufacturer found a way to do build-to-sell model. You go into the dealership, you pay the sticker, or if you're convinced by the dealer to do the market adjustment on top, they made more profit per vehicle. You got to remind yourselves, the vehicle manufacturers are publicly traded companies with shareholder value. They have one customer, and it's the shareholder. So at the end of the day, if it's more margin per vehicle at the end of the day, they win. So as you close the gap of the ICE variant, but still keep the other BEV variant there with some subsidies, yeah, maybe you're now $12,000 difference. Still substantial difference. And longer loan terms improved. I put that in quote because when someone goes and puts 96-month terms on there because they want to buy an electric vehicle at $500 a month, 96 months later, we're going to have another major issue. But this idea of lengthening those time frames is a problem. Range, look, no self-respecting BEV manufacturer is going to give you less than 230 miles of range. Even with their LFP batteries, up their NMC batteries, they're going to give you those chemistries even higher range, 400 miles. So the range hurdle is probably the one that's shrinking the most, which is really good. But there's still a concern for colder climates. There's still a concern for current generational buyers that say, hey, the one time a year I want to drive 500 miles gets me away from a BEV. We're targeting new consumers, not my generational consumer, for the BEVs in the mass market. Infrastructure is still an issue, and it's going to require both government and industry involvement. This is the idea of having the plugs at home, having the infrastructure on the road, taking the inconvenience away from a U.S. consumer, right? That is the biggest hurdle that's not on here. Inconveniencing an instant gratified U.S. consumer is one of the hardest parts that EV has to get across. And raw materials, this idea that we have to do everything in a clean way and still stuff get out of the ground. Those are probably, that's a tough one, right? Clean mining. But the idea is we'll just keep on pushing that needle around the country, around the world. Canada's going to be in a really good position because they have a lot of raw materials of this. This is going to be an issue. Our constant need to push China out is only going to just squeeze them right into North America anyway. So let's get into a lot of data here. North America, these are all disruptors I want to put. 10 slides of disruptions I want to talk about. In 2016, that was the biggest manufacturing of light vehicles in North America, 17.8 million units. 14 vehicle manufacturers got the job done. Fast forward to 2030, we have less volume and more than double the vehicle manufacturers in North America alone. Now, these new players aren't GM and Ford and Stellantis size, but they're disruptors because they're pulling a consumer to say, look at this new shiny object over here. John alluded to the fact of these shareholder values. These companies come out firing with no vehicles and are all of a sudden 10 times the valuation of GM on the stock market with no products to show for it. This is the new model coming out. So everyone wants to be the next Tesla. Spoiler alert, there is no next Tesla. Tesla's a unicorn, right? But they're going to be the Apple of the world. There's going to be other people fighting for that position. So the problem here is all these new players, these 15 new vehicle manufacturers, pull away from the legacy players that have to play on volume, which then have to pass that volume down their supply base, which then that supply base has to give them better prices on volume, but they can't because there's no more volume. So we're sort of caught chasing our tail as new manufacturers come into this market. Now, North America. Look, at forecasting, I hate hockey sticks, but with the problem my hockey stick gets created here in the BEV space, battery electric vehicle, FEV space, plug-in hybrids, Chevs are standard hybrids. We do fuel cells, but the number's so small in here, it's not in the forecast yet. I'll get you to 40% of all vehicles built in 2030 be pure battery electric vehicles. Okay, and yes, there's a stick there, but I agree 100% with John here. The next few years are going to be a trough area, our steady state area. There's going to be that hockey stick later, but I'm going to show you a slide on why our hockey stick exists. On the right-hand side, 35 million vehicles on the road in total that'll need a plug. And we know we have an infrastructure problem right today. Now we're going to quadruple these numbers that need infrastructure in 7 short years. And those that are embedded in the automotive space, 7 years is tomorrow in the automotive space because it's 2 life cycles away kind of thing. So we're not building iPhones so we can change a color once a year. We're planning on vehicles today that won't be built for 3 years, and that vehicle's going to be around for 5 years. So we're making plans for building vehicles today that will be here 8 years from today in this climate where we're having a lot of issues between electrification and non-electrification. North America, there's going to be 140 unique nameplates in North America in 2030 that are pure battery electric, all fighting for the same consumer. This is an unsustainable number, and this is our problem in forecasting. The yellow are all the new entrants every year. And in forecasting, we can't just make a judgment call, hey, we don't like what that BEV looks like, we're going to take it out. We have to give it volume in our forecast because our suppliers are bidding against it. Now, will we give them the 150,000 units each? No. But we got to give them some justification of building a volume at some sort of utilization of capacity that they're going to make money at. And when you put 10 and 20 and 50 of these manufacturers together, the market looks obscenely large. So at the end of the day, there's going to be some winners and there's going to be a lot of losers in these categories, and we have to stay on top of it. 48 different brands are going to be building these vehicles. 2019, there were 3 brands and 2 vehicles doing this whole thing. Okay, global BEVs. Tesla only has 5 nameplates right now. In 2030, they're going to have 8. If you look at all the BEVs also in the world, 752 other nameplates are going to be battery electric vehicles. The green is the number of battery electric vehicles per year that Tesla makes per nameplate. Profitability, north of 300,000 units. If you take all the rest, and yes, there's noise in there, some higher and lower, and you take all the other 752, it's an average less than 50,000 units a year of production. That's an unsustainable number in the automotive space. You cannot make money in that space in the long term. So there's going to be a lot of losers here. Way too much competition is going to change the mix. We got to find it and stay on top of it. BEV sales, yes, we're doing our victory lap. We hit 1 million sales this month. You know, there's 340 million people in the United States. There's 240 million that have driver's license. So our victory lap this month was we sold to 0.4% of the U.S. population bought BEVs. Hey, bravo, that's great. So any other industry, no one would really care about that number. The good news is I'm not anti-EV, we're pro-reality. We are on a momentum curve. We are moving forward. It's just going to be really, really long to get there, and we got to weather the storm to get there. Now, to get there, though, we need a healthy balance of entry level and luxuries. We cannot satisfy it with $113,000 crab walking vehicles or $130,000 Teslas. We're going to have $35,000 cars, $40,000, even $50,000. And people say, where's my $35,000 car? Where is it? I said, it's a Chevy Bolt. It's been here for a decade. Why aren't you buying the Chevy Bolt? Why aren't you buying the Nissan Leaf? And they go, no, wait a second, I want a $35,000 Tesla fighter. Different conversation altogether. Now, if you look on the right-hand side in terms of sales, Tesla's in yellow. So if we take Tesla noise out of it, of 600,000 units of sales, the next brand in line is the Bolt, 67,000 units. And the next one down there is the Mach-E, 40,000 units, right? Huge, huge gaps between the Tesla model and the non-Tesla model. Mexico. The Chinese are coming. It doesn't matter what we do to try to push them off, the Chinese are coming. And what we're going to say is right now that there are over 9% of all vehicles sold in Mexico are Chinese branded vehicles right now. Look at that hockey stick, right? That's not going to stop. That's a great market of entry. When the Chinese come, they're going to come through 3 areas. It's going to be Mexico or the country of California or China, or Canada, right? So that's where the decision making is going to be coming from in terms of how they're going to let the Chinese into the market, right? So BAIC, Chery, JAC, MG, all brands that are being consumed there right now. Okay, BEV leaderboard. I'll argue the fact that Tesla's not the winner in global by 2030. I got Volkswagen and Stellantis beating them. I don't care that Elon wants to put 20 million vehicles. You have to have the plant to build the 20 million vehicles, right? These Volkswagen and Stellantis have a strategy. They have the infrastructure, right? They can get the job done. It's a $6 million man here. They have the ability to get this done, and they have a plan to get there. So I will argue that Tesla will not be the leader. They don't have to be the leader. They were great. They set the mark, right? But they got us where we need to be. But they don't have to be the leader going forward into the future. And I'll go one step further to new energy vehicles. New energy vehicle is a BEV or a plug-in hybrid. Nothing lower than that, right? BYD beats everyone, right? Chinese brand, they are coming. Doesn't matter what you think. Chinese are, they're coming. It's not if, and it's when. So we wanted to sort of just bring a little empirical conversation to what we're going to talk about today, and we'll go from there. So I'm excited to talk to John about this. Thank you.
Okay, so MICHauto has prepared, I think, 6 questions for Joe and I to go at, and we get a minute each with each of these questions, and we've seen them, but I don't know what I'm going to say when they pop up. Okay, I'll ask for you, Joe. What's going on in today's U.S. EV market?
Oh, 1 minute, well, that's 17 seconds. I need more.
No.
Oh, that's, all right.
The clock has got to reset.
I'm going to clear that clock a little bit. I'm taking those 11 seconds. So, look, the EV market, look, again, we're not anti-electrification. It's fantastic. It's moving forward. We just have to come to the reality that BEVs are a solution, not the solution. You need a healthy, balanced portfolio to get there. And when you look at what the manufacturers were saying in their strategies before about, hey, look at this cool little platform over here, right? Our BEV platform. And all of a sudden they came out, they go, wait a second, I can stick a transmission in that tunnel right there. Wait a second, I know they're going to have something. So now, oh, there's a hybrid version. Now we got suppliers calls and say, I'm being asked to bid on the ICE version too. So the idea is there's the shareholder value is the ultimate goal here for manufacturers, and they really got to get the job done. And the way to get there is a balanced portfolio. And the last thing I want to say about is the new consumer. The new consumer is a socially motivated consumer. They're I make the joke tongue-in-cheek. If I want to be a car company, I'm going to go find a designer and make 5 of them and get the 5 top TikTokers on the planet, and I'm going to get 1 million eyeballs in 2 hours. And that's my new marketing strategy. So the idea is not targeting, unfortunately, our generation, but they're going after our kids and our grandkids.
Yeah, so what I'd say is going on is kind of what I alluded to in my talk. A lot of the public just doesn't know if they really want to get an EV. You've got the early adopters who all came in, rushed in. They're still there, but the big wave of them have already come into the market and gotten the cars that they want. Now you've got another contingency of people who are like, boy, I really want to get an EV, but there's not the kind of EV that I want out there, or it's not from the brand that I want to go with, or whatever it is. But once those things get solved, boom, they're going to be in the market. And then there's an even bigger chunk of the market that says, this EV stuff is pretty interesting, but I'm going to wait until I see that everybody's got one, or most people, and I'm going to wait until I know that the charging infrastructure is out there and reliable, and then I'll think about it. So right now we're in the trough, I think is what Joe said. There was all this euphoria, and now we got the hangover from that, and everybody's thinking that it's the end of the world when it comes to EVs. But I'm saying just give it a few more years, and this thing's going to really start to pick up again. Next question.
Next question. John, what roles do hybrids play in the EV market transition?
That's a good question right now. So, you've seen companies like Toyota say, we told you, hybrids are the perfect bridge connector to an EV world. There's no range anxiety. You don't have to worry about a charging infrastructure. It's only got an inky-dinky little battery, so we can use those materials to build a whole lot more hybrids. And hybrids, if you go back just a few years ago, they were victims of this politicization. If you went and told people, I drive a hybrid, they instantly branded you as one of these tree-hugging, environmentalists. That's kind of gone now. Now, in fact, what I told people in the industry is, look, if you want to sell more hybrids, don't call them hybrids. Just point to one in the showroom and say, that one gets 50 miles to the gallon. Do you want that one? And that's how you sell hybrids. Don't call them hybrids. So hybrids do play a big role in this. Plug-in hybrids are also a brilliant transition technology where literally if you're religious about it and plug in every night, you drive completely on electricity. And then when you want to take a long trip, no problem. You go as far as that you want to go. So perfect bridge transition, but I think hybrids will start to lose their cachet once this next generation of EVs hits in the 2026 timeframe.
Yeah, John and I joked we were going to have "We Told You So" T-shirts, but that we thought it would have been a little bit inappropriate here about this EV revolution. So I agree 100%. But you got to look at it again. You got to get down to the money. You got to follow the money here. The idea is if you sold everyone today a battery electric vehicle, let's say they existed, and you sold everyone a battery electric vehicle, what do you sell them 5 and 7 years from now, right? A better battery electric vehicle? So you got to walk them through the strategy. You want to move someone from ICE to hybrid. Now you convince them, okay, this electrification thing is real. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move you to a hybrid into a BEV. Okay, I'm still using a battery. And then long game, I'm going to move you to a fuel cell. Hey, instead of plugging the wall, we're going to give you a pump again. You got to find a way. Toyota's always been, we want to be around for 500 years, not 50 years. We sell you everything right now, our best technology. We have nothing to sell you 7 years from today. So hybrids are definitely a needed transition story to get in the market. And you're right. I mean, there's some really good solid products out there. Don't call them on hybrid. I think the winner is going to be extended range, right? Stellantis is going huge in extended range. You still put a 3.6-liter engine in this thing. It's used as a generator for the battery to motivate the wheels. The engine never touches the axle, and everyone gets the best of both worlds. So there's a lot of unknown tapped energy out there, so to speak, and I think hybrids are the only way to really bridge that gap.
Right. Next question. Okay, Joe, government mandates, costly to build and high prices. Where's this leave the consumer?
Oh boy, the consumer. So look, electrification is not a consumer-driven initiative. It is a governmental and environmental-driven initiative. And I always make the joke, and I apologize if I offend anyone, is if Volkswagen never got caught and Tesla never existed, we'd be talking lightweighting, honestly. So the only way we're going to make this thing work is we have to throw government money at it. We have to subsidize. But when you look at the sticker, all the manufacturers did was they moved the price up to the subsidy level. So they're actually making really good profit because the subsidy exists right this second. So the government is mandated to do this. China tried this. China was incentivizing people to buy electric vehicles. You got paid less to do the license plate, all the other stuff, and then they took the incentive away. It was a tax break, and all of a sudden the forecast went from here to here. It was literally a peak. So my concern is that government is heavily involved. It is highly politicized. We can all agree that. But there's an issue here that we may have a changing leadership, if not this next election, any election past that. And if one of those elected officials decides to pull access to funding, we may have a very serious problem in the adoption rate of BEVs in this country.
Yeah, slightly different. I totally agree, but slightly different take on it. So government mandates. Well, people bought a lot of Teslas with no government mandate whatsoever. They looked at the car and they went, that's for me. And that's what the rest of the industry's got to be able to do. But they've got to be much more innovative at it. And that gets to the costly to build. Tesla does not design, engineer, or manufacture cars like any legacy automaker. You know, the legacies, when they figure out, let's do a new car, they build interior bucks to determine the interior packaging, where everybody sits, where the luggage goes, and everything like that. And then design puts a beautiful body around it. Or design comes up with a beautiful car, and then engineering's got to figure out how to stuff everything into it. That's not what Tesla does. Tesla starts out designing its cars by defining the car in software. Every single function is defined in software. Then they start doing the rest of the car. So they take a totally different approach. Same with manufacturing, the gigacastings, all that sort of thing. So it hasn't just been government mandates. They're not just necessarily costly to build. It's just time for the legacies to catch up to Tesla. Okay, Joe?
Hey, John, from manufacturing to the market, the Tesla influence?
Did I just talk about Tesla?
Yeah, you talked about it.
And then there's this guy who is, wow. I use complicated person when people ask me what they think about, what I think about Elon Musk. Very complicated person. But, you know, he talks in terms of first principles. So Tesla, when they try to figure out any problem, they go back to the basics of physics to try to solve it. Remember that picture, that film, or that video of the SpaceX rockets coming back from outer space and landing on their tails? It was a science fiction movie. How did they do that? NASA gave up on it. Everybody else said it was impossible to do. They went back to first principles. And that's how they approach everything in the company. It doesn't matter what kind of a problem it is. They go back to first principles. I think this is the most impactful thing that Elon has done for the auto industry. You know, they came out with over-the-air updates over a decade ago. I rank it right up there with the pneumatic tire and the internal combustion engine. Radical change in the automotive industry, and it goes to this guy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'd say Tesla's a unicorn because they can play both sides of the coin. They could play, hey, I'm a legacy manufacturer that builds 1 million vehicles, and I'm established, I'm the most profitable car company out there. Oh, by the way, I'm an innovator. I'm also new to this market. So whatever I test on the market, you're going to have to try it out. And maybe I'm just testing it. You know, I want to have a little audience participation. Everyone see the Cybertruck? Anyone see the Cybertruck reveal? Okay, pretend that's a Chevy Cybertruck or a Stellantis Cybertruck. Is it polarizing in design, or is it just not a very good-looking vehicle? So here's the thing, and I don't mean to be rude, but this is what they're allowed to do. They could throw anything in at the market and see, hey, it's going to stick because the Tesla rider is going to say, I'll buy it. And he's going to sell every single one of those things, right? And it's going to be innovative, right? There's a lot of innovation baked into it. But it sort of said, don't care what this thing looks like. Look at the interior. Look what this thing can do, the brains of it, the technology, what it's designed to do maybe for the future. Other car manufacturers don't have the luxury of testing the market with a product like the Cybertruck.
Yeah, that's right. Next question. Oh, Joe, this is a good one to talk about. The rise of Chinese EV powerhouse BYD.
Yeah, BYD. Guess what? Volvo's Chinese owned, if people know that one. So BYD, they're coming, right? They're coming in droves. They're going to come with a substantial electric vehicle to be competitive in North America. They're the largest new energy vehicle producer in the world, as I showed before. And what they did is they did a different strategy. Tesla took a strategy, I'm going to tackle North America with high-end, very costly products, and they did it from we got a really cool technology. BYD, they've been in the market at the same time as Tesla. But they did it from, we're going to go affordability. We're going to build a business model. They've made their mark in China. They are now crushing their mark in Europe right now. And they're going to plant their flag in Europe. And when they plant their flag in Europe, they're going to reduce their tariffs to North America substantially. And then eventually they're going to sell 50,000 units here in North America. And they're going to plant their flag here. We said it back in the 80s about Toyota. They're here. We said about in the 90s about the Korean manufacturers. They had their own plan. The BYD strategy, highly competitive battery electric vehicle. Hey, it's Warren Buffett back still a little bit, right? So they are coming, and nothing's going to stop them from coming in North America.
Yeah, exactly right. Warren Buffett saw something in this company years ago, and he's made a boatload of money off investing in it. I've had other experts in the industry tell me that BYD is out Tesla-ing Tesla. It has crushed Tesla in terms of EV sales in China. You know, everybody still thinks Tesla is the #1 seller of EVs in the world. It is in the world, but BYD has surpassed it in China and will surpass it in the rest of the world. Why? Because they have a boatload of different models and different price points, and they're churning them out far faster than even Tesla is able to do. So keep an eye on that company. I'll make a wild prediction that sometime in the next decade, BYD will be the largest automaker in the world.
I would support that comment. I would support that bet. Yeah, that's correct. All right, John, where are we in the next 5 years?
And this is our last question.
Yeah, this is it. Do you want to do it, or do I go?
Oh, I guess I go first. Yeah. Where are we in 5 years? Look, in terms of EVs or in terms of the auto industry, I think this is the most disruptive time of the automotive industry since probably 1903. In fact, I looked to 1903 to give us guidance as to where we're going in the future, because there were hundreds of car companies then. The technology was changing at such a rapid rate. Consumers didn't know where to go or anything like that, and things got settled down. In 5 years, I think, I hope the legacies get through it. I really do. That's how much danger I think we're in. I think the public is going to warm more and more up to electric vehicles as better electric vehicles come out in more market segments at lower price points with an infrastructure that's out there. Believe me, in 5 years, this EV thing's going to look a whole lot better than it does today.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope you get, you know, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but we're neither of us are anti-electrification, right? We just it's cutting edge, it's groundbreaking, it has to be invested in, right? If we're talking about idea of Michigan being the center of it, yes, be the center of it, right? Don't let anyone else take that prize away from you. It's coming, but it has to be a healthy balance of what is coming, right? And there's got to be every stakeholder has some skin in this game. And we have to talk about the supply base and the local jurisdictions and the federal jurisdictions and the consumer. They're all part of this solution. I agree with you. We're going to be steady. I think we've hit our what we call our our early adopter apex. We're going to come down in North America. We're going to have a sort of steady state where we're not going to have, I don't think we're going to diminish. I think we'll still have 9-10%, which is nice. But I think then we're going to have the hockey stick again back in that 27 time range when new things like the Scout come out and really cool, innovative products. But yeah, I wouldn't take your foot off the pedal on electrification. I would just, I'd walk in eyes wide open with it, knowing it's here. It's a too big to fail proposition. The manufacturers have trillions of dollars in it. The governments have trillions of dollars in it. They will not let this fail. And so just got to sort of be patient and see how this whole thing plays out.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Joe, it's been a pleasure doing this with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, all the time.
And thanks to all of you, too.
Thank you, everyone.
The next session of the program is sponsored by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. Please welcome the Executive Director of S&P Global Mobility Consulting, Michael Robinette. Executive Analyst at Cox Automotive, Michelle Krebs. Principal and Chief Executive Officer of Anderson Economic Group, Patrick L. Anderson. And to moderate the discussion, please welcome host of JR Morning, Guy Gordon.
All right, Michelle. Good afternoon. We're delighted to be the anchor leg of the relay here. And let's get started with it. We were told at the beginning of this cycle for this labor contract that it was an unprecedented time, this dramatic transformation in the industry once in a century. It was an unprecedented strategy that the UAW used. At the end, the word unprecedented got overworked to a degree that I think we've ever seen before. The question now is, were there new precedents? And what are they? And where is the industry, both financially and from a product standpoint, going forward? So we hope we can answer all those questions for you. I want to start with my good friend Patrick Anderson, who during the strike was kind of giving us the tale of the tape. Like this heavyweight bout, who had the reach, who was landing the punches. In the final analysis, how were your forecasts? And when you look at the losses that are being reported by the big three, are they synced up?
The strike turned out to be, and this is not news to anyone in this room, extraordinarily expensive. Starting with UAW members.
So you're saying it was unprecedented?
It was, yeah. By comparison, the Anderson Economic Group estimates of the 2019 strike were a little over $4 billion in losses, a lot of which were wage losses, but also suppliers. This is $10.4 billion through 6 weeks. We estimated that the Detroit 3 manufacturers alone lost $4 billion, but suppliers, many of whom are here, lost almost as much. And workers, I mean, the UAW workers, $650 million through week 6, but also
Let me ask
lots
the
of other
suppliers
workers.
that are here, did you feel like that the media got it? Did they tell your story very well?
No.
Okay.
Well, I was trying.
We tried. I mean, I can tell you that we tried to get it back to that. And so did Patrick.
So, I mean, it's extremely expensive, and you can see it now. You can see it in income tax decline. You can see in retail sales decline in Michigan. And at least if I look at the announcements thus far by GM and Ford and some interpretation of Chrysler, they've already acknowledged about $3.5 billion in losses. And I think by the end of the year, when we see 10Ks, it'll probably be larger.
Okay, but they seem to be saying, especially when they're talking to analysts, and maybe this depends on the audience, right? They're saying, well, we can mitigate this. We can recoup the lost production. We can adjust it. I think Mary Barra said we've already eliminated $500 million in costs and yielded savings in this quarter. We're going to duplicate that in the next. So they've already erased the $1 billion in losses, or at least have mitigated it. First of all, if that's the case, to some degree, when Sean Fain said, well, they've got it and we can get it, and that this isn't an existential threat, was Sean Fain proven right by some of the comments that came out of the big three post-strike?
Well, and by the way, good afternoon. I would say the contracts are 4.5-year contracts. So, I mean, it's gonna be spread out over those 4.5 years. You know, when the OEMs say we're going to be able to make it up, they only have so many levers that they can pull. You know, we were talking backstage about, well, can they improve productivity? I think you saw from the earlier presentations, productivity is already pretty high. So it's not like, oh, well, you know, we can put our tires on differently. Most of that easy, low-hanging fruit has already been picked.
So are you calling BS on that?
No, I'm saying that you can delay capital, number
I was
one.
just using some of Sean Fain's vernacular, sorry.
You can delay capital, but you know, a lot of the content in the vehicle is purchased from the supply base, and so a lot of that is code for. We're going to go back to the suppliers and help and ask for them to help fund some of that, but that's going to be very, very difficult in the current environment.
And so long-term, looking just beyond the immediate post-strike environment, maybe it wasn't an existential threat to the big three, even though we heard from Jim Farley and others during the, and we're all going to say a lot of things during the heat of battle. But is it an existential threat for some of the suppliers in this room, and especially as you go down the food chain?
I think there's no doubt. If you've got an OEM and they pay now 15% this year and another, let's say, 5% the next couple of years, and you're a supplier next door, you're going to have to raise your wages the same level, or at least very close to the same level. So, and therefore, to stay in business, you're going to have to charge more for your product. It's not rocket science. So that's essentially, this is going to find its way through the ecosystem all the way through. Absolutely.
So this is the only strike, I think, in any memory, unprecedented, to use the word, Michelle, where we heard from the UAW that they didn't really, it was a stated goal that they were going to damage the brand. That's kind of a scorched earth strategy that we haven't seen before, that you really don't care where the chips fall or how you're going to pick them up afterwards. How much were the brands damaged? Do we have a sense of that in the research that you've seen? And to Michael's point, it's trickled down. It's going to come down to the consumer.
Well, a couple thoughts. So they are not going to be able to make it all up, certainly in raising the prices of vehicles.
Because the consumers are very
Well, because we expect to see a rather flat market in the next year or two. So they aren't going to make it up on volume. And we think that affordability of vehicles is going to be a huge limitation in terms of higher sales. It's already a big issue. We think that about 10% of people that normally would buy new cars have dropped out of the market already because they can't afford vehicles. So I don't know where they make it up, because it's certainly not going to be in slapping on much higher prices. And in fact, we've seen, you know, incentives increase. All those big prices that happened during the chip shortage, those are gone.
So does the affordability equation change whether we're talking about EVs or conventional ICE vehicles?
Well, EVs are more expensive, so that certainly doesn't help the equation at all.
But we have to be careful, and I think John and Joe talked a little bit about this earlier. We've BEV'd on the edges. We've BEV'd, and I use that as a verb. You can steal that, I don't care. But we've done full-size pickup trucks, we've done luxury products, and we've done performance vehicles. Mom and Pa Smith in Greenville, Michigan, that drive an Equinox, we don't have a BEV for them right now. We really don't, not in high volume. The industry is going to start building what we'll call mid-market products. And to Michelle's point, we could say, well, BEVs are expensive. Well, the ones that are on the market are expensive because those are the ones that people have demanded. But we're going to start to BEV in the middle. That's where the real tell of the tape is going to come, is the pricing of those vehicles versus their ICE equivalents or hybrid equivalents, and how all that is going to work its way through.
Right.
And none of this is happening in a vacuum. We've got higher than normal interest rates. There is this idea that we could have a soft landing. The market has been betting that is becoming more apparent and maybe more likely. Patrick, where do you see that happening in terms of reaching that 2% goal, and how will that influence the consumer environment?
I remember, Guy, when I got started here as a bank economist for Dave Littman, who taught me a substantial fraction of what I know about the auto industry. And one of the things that I learned way back then was number of weeks it takes you to buy the car. Whether it's an EV, a new car, used car, that matters. And if inflation's taken that away from you, and if inflation's raising the price, or if it's expensive to have a vehicle, you're likely to not buy a vehicle. And I do think that the auto industry is, to Michelle's point, and to yours as well, some of this production is not being made up. Some of it went to other automakers. And some of it went to people that said, okay, I'm walking away, I'm buying a used car, just keeping my old jalopy running. And we're at risk here. If we raise prices any more than they are, they're already extraordinarily high. I mean,
So if the costs are $500 per car, as I think we heard from Murray Barra in the past week, $575 cost increase at the end of the contract. They believe they can mitigate a lot of that with some cost savings. But is there room to pass it along to the consumer? And if so, again, getting back to Sean Fain, was the hyperbole overblown that this is an existential threat? It's a couple $100 on a car that's already, you're paying $50,000 for.
when you talk about adding $900 a car, which I think is a more realistic estimate, and particularly when you're talking about suppliers, you know, you're talking about another couple weeks of work for somebody, and just to get basically the same car. We're not talking about any quality improvements for this, it's just increasing the cost. And I think it affects whether people buy it, and I think we, as an industry, one of the consequences of the strike and the contracts will be, we will forego some production, some investments, some of which are already apparent, and some products will be priced out of the market, and we won't make them.
So this was a unique strategy on the part of the UAW, and I was giving you the frog in the pot scenario when we were backstage, and that instead of throwing one frog in a very hot pot and then expecting everybody else to follow it, all frogs were in, they turned the heat up slowly. There may be a fairness equation to that, but in the end, in terms of lost production and cost to the industry, did that make a difference? Was it just as disruptive and damaging to the industry, or did it turn out maybe a little bit better if they say they can recoup a lot of these production losses?
Well, like we were saying earlier, there's some plants that.
Or is the jury out? I mean.
I don't know if the jury's out. I mean, it's pretty cut and dried what was struck and what the inventory was and what kind of plants. But you know, I think towards the end where KTP, Kentucky Truck Plant, went down. I mean, I can't think of a more profitable plant, literally almost in the entire world. And Ford people may not agree with me, but it's a very, very important facility. And when you lose the slot to build a vehicle at that facility, you will never make it up because they build 120 hours a week. And you can't, the good Lord has not given us more hours in the week. So that's it. Once you lose the ability, you can't build that vehicle. So, I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on vehicle manufacturers. I think, you know, when Arlington was taken down, there was another. That was, you know, that to me was the one that basically said, hey, we mean business, and I, you know, for good or for bad, there was a resolution pretty quickly afterwards.
So we really won't know what the long-range effect of this is until it trickles down to the suppliers.
To the suppliers and the consumers. I mean, so like Michelle said, you know, the suppliers are going to have to pay more to pay their people. Literally 65% of the manufactured cost of the vehicle comes from the supply base, at least in the the ICE world. In the BEV world, it'll probably go down, but nonetheless, it's still very important. And when that trickles down, that is going to raise prices, and consumers are going to have to make up that difference.
Circling back, Michelle, I don't know if we got to it, but in terms of this idea that the UAW had a stated goal of damaging the brand, is there damage out there? And even most consumers aren't going to hear Mary Barra say that, well, we can mitigate these costs. They're just going to believe that this is costing them a lot more, the average consumer.
Oh, if you were in the market in 2019 and are in the market now, it's big shock. So, I think we are living in a little microcosm here, and we focus on this a lot. You look across the country, and yes, they knew about the strike, but I don't think that they thought, well, I'm not going to buy GMs. We saw sales continue. We did not see any slowdown in sales. We were actually quite surprised at how well sales held up. Now, here's the other thing, though. Inventories were up. And we are seeing a lot of buildup in inventory, which is going to mean that auto manufacturers are going to also have to do incentives. We are anticipating a normal year where production increases, inventory builds up, and incentives will have to be used, which is another cost to the automakers.
Yeah. Patrick, during the ramp up to this, there was a lot of concern on the part of the big three that there was already a huge labor cost disadvantage against the transplants and against Tesla. I think in some cases it was up to 40%. where are we in that now? Because we have seen, I mean, it didn't take long for Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, all of them to say, we're going to maybe not match that first-year increase, but we're going to come close. So in the final analysis, is that labor cost advantage, disadvantage wider or about the same because it lifted all boats to some degree?
We were concerned about this, and the Detroit automakers, Detroit-based automakers, were at a competitive disadvantage in terms of cost with other U.S.-based manufacturers. I'm not talking about building in Korea or China. I'm talking about building in the United States. Many times I have to remind people that Toyota builds here, Honda builds here, Hyundai builds here, Mercedes builds here, BMW builds here, and Tesla builds here too. And I haven't exhausted everything. And hopefully our suppliers are also selling to them. And there was a cost disadvantage. There was also a product. I mean, the Detroit automakers focused on products that were more effective, that they were good at. You mentioned a couple of them, like the trucks and the SUVs, of which the market leaders are, General Motors and Ford and Chrysler. There's good products out there from other makers, but these are the market leaders. Unfortunately, what we see here is we took a hit to our brand. I mean, that was painful. I thought it was unnecessary to call the automakers and the industry the enemy. I think that hurts everyone in the room. But the prices went up, which we said right at the beginning. Of course, wages are going to go up. They have to go up. And it didn't take the other automakers a week or 2 weeks to say, okay, we'll raise our rates. In fact, I think Hyundai's first-year wages is actually higher increase than what's in the UAW. So our cost disadvantage did not go away. One of the things that I think is bad about this strike is, there were very damaging things that were said in the industry. That rhetoric, that discussion of the automakers as the enemy was not constructive. And meanwhile, we have competitors out there, and they're in a competitive market. They're raising the wages as they should, and we still have a cost disadvantage.
Bottom line, Michael, was it an effective strategy on the part of the UAW, this stand-up strategy? And they're going to try it again 2.0 at the transplants.
If you're an employee, you certainly feel it worked, but I will say something that, let's say you're one of the D3 and you decide, I've got a new product, I want to build it. Why on earth would you consider building it in the United States when you're going to have to deal with this sort of animosity? Why wouldn't you look at Mexico or Canada or some other strategy? To me, I think what they've done is essentially, like you said, scorched earth. We're going to make sure that every one of our plants has a future. Here's the future legislated in the contract. And if we get more than that, great. But I think if you're the one of the Detroit three, you're thinking, I've got to really think about what I'm going to do in the United States going forward. And I hate to say that because it's a great place to build vehicles, but it has changed the dynamic, in my opinion.
So stand-up 2.0, they're already going, I think they've already got some marketing plans out there, and they're targeting specific plants. I have seen quotes from analysts saying that there is no time better than this for the UAW to go after the transplants again, and that the likelihood of success has never been higher. That doesn't mean it isn't a pretty steep climb. So, Michelle, you've watched this a lot.
I would say there is no better time than this, but I don't think that they'll probably be very successful. They're located in southern states.
That's one of the key things. People don't talk about the culture of the regions of the country where these plants are located.
Yeah.
You would agree, Michael?
Oh, I would agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely. So
you still, low likelihood that the transplant effort, organizing effort?
I don't think the likelihood's any more today than it was a couple of years ago, especially given that the attitude and the adversarial relationship that has sort of emerged over the last 6 months.
Michelle, you follow the product mix very closely. How much has the strike maybe change some of the product mix? Is in order to recoup those costs, are there going to be some changes?
Well, I think we don't know that yet, but I think that's certainly one of the ways that they'll address this and offset costs. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be looking at their product lines. And then we also know that, you know, on the electric vehicle side, they're looking at, oh, maybe we don't, well, GM has rolled back some of its launches, pushed them out. So I think there will be a reevaluation of a lot of the portfolios. Also figuring out, maybe they have to take some costs out in terms of what features are.
Well, and more curiously, I mean, we had this hint last week that they're going to perhaps add hybrids. I mean, after they stated that, you know, they're going to be 50% EV, was it, by 2030? Now they're saying,
You mean
well,
GM,
we
you're
might.
talking about General Motors.
General Motors, now they're saying we're going to add hybrids back into the product mix, perhaps. How do you interpret that?
Well, I was at an event where Mary Barra spoke last night, and she wouldn't commit to it, but she said something interesting. She said, well, we've got the technology in China. We could just, you know, bring it here. But
Have you read the room?
Well, yeah, and also it doesn't transfer that easily, I don't think. You don't just...
Not too easily. But
I mean, not
you have to
certainly not
make sure
quickly.
that the supply base is equipped to build that content here.
It just doesn't happen. You don't just overnight do that. So.
Mary Barra did say that, Patrick, that they are on target to make money, make money, so I'm going to do my air quotes thing, on EVs by their target date. But maybe there were some conditions there. How did you read that? And do you think that, are they whistling by the graveyard a bit there, or is that attainable?
One of the things we identified early as the wild card in this was EVs in this strike. I didn't know how aggressive UAW would be about organizing the battery plants. I actually thought it was embarrassing how low the wages were at some of the battery plants.
Right.
I would have rather worked at McDonald's than some of those factories.
And not to mention the fact that these people were told, particularly in Lordstown, that these jobs were replacing the Lordstown plant, and they were misled. Okay, and I'm not sure exactly who. There were politicians, there were companies in there, but that was part of the anger that fed the the pretty strong public support for the UAW strike, and I sensed that too. I mean, I was in agreement that they were misled, but if you read carefully, you don't actually have to read that carefully, but if your financial representative says that you might make single-digit EBIT after federal tax credits by 2025,
And interest, yeah.
that means you are almost certainly losing money through 2025. And I mean, I hate to be the blunt person, but when you're losing money and then you don't count financing costs, you don't count taxes, and you have a huge federal tax credit set, and you want to add all those in and still maybe you're single digit, that means you're losing money. That being said, I think it would actually be something of a victory for General Motors or Ford to break even on, even in optimistic accounting, by 2025. I think the much more important issue is, can you produce products that people want, what you're saying. Can afford. And like you said, I mean, I've been driving a battery electric vehicle for 3 years. I bought in one of those segments that you said we BEV'd in.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not a mainstream segment. It's way too expensive. It's way too burdensome. And unless we make products that a large number of Americans voluntarily want to buy, we're in trouble as an industry.
How much is riding on the Equinox?
Oh, it's Equinox. It's going to be, a new quote-unquote Ford Edge. It's going to be a new Cherokee. I mean, it's not just Equinox. There's a whole nest of new products in that segment. But I think something's been lost here. BEVs and EVs are all about economies of scale. And right now, we're not there yet. I think a lot of people miss that, well, this vehicle automatically is going to lose money right now. Well, I think it was always planned that it's going to take a while to get the economies of scale up. That's why all these new battery plants are coming in. And these launches are going to be lumpy. I don't care what anybody says. To get new propulsion system, new vehicle, new plant, sometimes new people, and new consumers. Dealers haven't really sold them. I mean, everything is new. New, basically, to me, means it's going to be problematic. It's take a while to work its way through. I guess some people are not quite as patient as they need to be. So
well, and I think that when it's all started, it seemed like when all these announcements were being made, it almost, we were led to believe this is a real linear thing, and it never seemed like it would be that way. And now Mary Barra once again last night said it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we'd gone in
Well, it's always going to be a bumpy ride if it's something other than the consumer driving it.
Yes.
Right? So there's a discussion going on in Washington right now about these EV tax credits, and also there's a debate going on whether or not there is an actual EV mandate. The Biden administration says there isn't. Is there an EV mandate? When you look at the tailpipes emissions instructions coming out of the EPA and elsewhere, and how do you satisfy a mandate if nobody told the consumer?
There's absolutely an EV mandate in the proposed rules from the EPA. There's no two ways around it. If you read it, which I did, I endured it. I didn't endure the whole 1,000, but I did read a solid 100, okay? And literally their target, I'm not making this up, their support for their target of over 50% was a collection of press releases that were assembled by an advocacy group. That was the EPA's scientific basis for saying we could be selling 60% or more. And this is where our automakers, our suppliers, we're all in this. Like, we have this proposed rule mandating this, and then California's right behind, or as they would say, in front. As other states where California's rule purports to outlaw the sale of any ICE vehicle. I mean, even fire trucks. I'm like, you know, who's going to put out the wildfires? I want to say in California. So we are actually absolutely facing it. I understand the difficulty the automakers are making, but back to the point, your point, you have to make a product that consumers voluntarily want to buy. And I think that's the big reckoning we've got the next few years.
Wall Street Journal this morning put up a forecast showing that the 50% is not only unattainable, it is by a factor of 3 off. That by that target date, the more likely market share penetration is going to be 15%. Where are we in that range?
I don't agree with that.
You think it'll be more than
that?
that?
Oh, yeah, it'll be more than that. It may not be 50. It's certainly 50 is going to be very tough. 50 means that, 50% of the vehicles sold in the market are going to be BEVs. Think about everything that's sold in the Midwest in rural economies, and it's going to be a mix. It's always going to be a mix, and 50's going to be pretty tough, but 15 is way too low.
We're at about 8% now. So.
Yeah, I worry that anytime you have regulations or politics driving it, you're basically pushing the industry onto a trap door, and then saying we're just going to hope it doesn't open and that everybody else will follow. Are the consumers about ready to pull that lever and say, no, we're not going there yet? And what does that do to the communities that have invested? The Marshalls, the Big Rapids, the state of Michigan. We've ponied up SOAR fund money to support the BEV supply chain. If the return on that investment, if the dividends are both going to be delayed, deferred, or diminished, what kind of a bad taste is that going to leave? Have we also been, to some degree, not defrauded, but have we been harmed by that?
I actually, there was a day in May where there was editorials written in the Detroit News. One was written by me, one was written by Sean Fain. We didn't coordinate, okay? Both of us said the same thing. He was much more blunt. We are spending, as taxpayers, huge amounts of money to subsidize battery electric vehicles, and then we have low-paying jobs, as you said, embarrassingly low-paying jobs, and we're forcing people to buy it, and they're not profitable. That doesn't make sense. He then went on to what his agenda was, and I went to a somewhat different agenda about the whole industry, about Michigan, but absolutely this is a serious issue of the country and Michigan investing in this and pushing consumers ahead of where they want to go. I want, my whole career I've been here in the center of the auto industry. I want it to continue to be the center of the auto industry. And I think one of the biggest risks we face isn't that we won't figure out how to make this stuff. We've been figuring out how to make this stuff for over a century. We had electric cars on Woodward 120 years ago. And
you go out
steamers.
to Fairlane Manor.
Yeah.
In Dearborn, Mrs. Ford drove an electric.
Yeah, right.
The plug is still there.
Right. 120 years we've been driving electric cars down Woodward. Okay, we know how to do this. We know how to do this as good as anybody. But if we put ourselves in the position where the government is forcing us to build something that consumers don't want, that does not work. And this is the reckoning that I feel we have.
But I think that consumers, and I think John said it earlier, is that consumers are warming up to that. We have seen that. I mean, EV sales rose 50% over the past year. They are warming up to them, and we are going to get more compelling vehicles. So it's just going to take longer than
which is getting those affordable vehicles out the door. But I had Jake Fisher from Consumer Reports on my show this morning. You know, they tested the range, found out that the majority of vehicles didn't reach what was on the EPA sticker. I don't know.
High repair costs.
Shocked by that. But the other thing is, it is shocking. 79% more problems in a vehicle that supposedly is supposed to be simpler because it doesn't have as many moving parts.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of new technologies, and nobody said that it was going to be perfect right out of the gate. And I think one thing that's really important, and any of the D3 will tell you this, they are working like overtime on new technology in the battery space. Battery chemistries are going to change so quickly, it's going to be blinding. And they're going to get better, and they're going to get safer, and they're going to be able to recharge.
Less expensive.
Greater range, less recharge time. All of that is going to work its way through. I hate to say it, but, those of us that know the automotive industry and look way beyond, people are thinking way too short-sighted on this. I mean, we are changing the ecosystem that's been building for a century, and we're trying to do it in 6 years. It's really tough to do that, and in fact, almost impossible. But it's not a matter of if, but when.
All right. I just have a few seconds left. Patrick, I wanted to ask you, in the normal consumer spending cycle that we're in here, we did just see a significant portion of our employees get a significant pay bump.
Yeah.
What kind of Christmas does that mean for a lot of area retailers and just families?
Michigan really suffered October, November. Retail sales are down, income tax collection down, as you'd expect when when you have a strike. And that I do think that the wage increases were coming. The wage increases will benefit a lot of the workers. The ratification bonuses disproportionately affect us in a positive way. So that's basically a transfer of money from shareholders across the country to a large number of people living here. So those will be positive. But I have all the concerns about next year that we talked about. And again, I'm an EV optimistic. I've been driving one for 3 years. But that long road, if the government mandates something impossible to happen, it doesn't happen. It's still impossible. Give it 10 years or 15 years. Yeah, we can be really successful.
All right. Merry Christmas, happy holidays early to all of you. Patrick, Michelle, Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michelle, pleasure being on
Nice
with
meeting you.
Please welcome back to the stage Glenn Stevens Jr.
Okay, I told you we were going to cover a lot of ground today. I think we did. So usually you say, I'm standing between you and the bar, but the bar's behind you. So we'll get there in just a second. Let me wrap things up by first thanking everybody who spoke and gave their thoughts and participated in panels today. A round, please, for them. So a couple things to wrap things up. Those of you who know me well know I love this book. If you haven't read this book, I would highly recommend it. This is from the chairman and founder of Intel, Andy Grove. He talks a lot about inflection points, but there's a couple points I want to make about where we're at and where we're going. This new environment, and boy, that AI presentation right at the beginning of the day sure laid that out. There's two rules. First, everything happens faster. And second, anything that can be done will be done. If it's not done by you, someone else will do it. And the second is there are two options. You either adapt or die. So when we look at Michigan, and we look at that inflection point of the things we talked about today, AI, electrification, tech talent, sustainability, this is our option, right? We have to figure out how do we take that upward trajectory, because you can't force yourself through the inflection point. Things can't stay the same. And I think many of you know that we've had that mentality through the decades of what we don't want things to change. Well, this world's changing really fast around us. You heard that today. So I told you I'd come back to 2 reports that we worked on this year. And one is the high-tech talent perception study. And you know, it's both enlightening and positive and also sobering, and it also helps us inform the work. Most youth agree that the automotive and mobility industry is a high-tech field, but roughly half, and we surveyed 900 students inside the state and some outside the state, and parents and teachers and counselors, but roughly half don't see that as the career that they want, and they're looking for these things. And this is very clear when we're looking at how do we attract talent, develop salary, work-life balance, benefits, cost of living, and quality of life. And which is why I love Nando and Caroline talking today, because you know, they are living it. And you heard why they're living it and why they want to live it. The other thing I want to reference, and you saw this if you were at Mackinac, and you probably saw the report, we did this study with Richard Florida and his group earlier in the year that kicked off all this high-tech talent work. Because we said if we want to understand why high-tech talent grows and where it grows, like what are the key factors? And I would submit that these 3 things are very instrumental to Michigan's growth. Transformational technology and innovation, talent and placemaking. Okay? So we put a list together of kind of the 6 things that, and you probably heard most of this today in one form or another, but it's been informing our work and it'll carry us forward, that if we look at how to propel Michigan forward, develop our own tech talent, improve that experiential learning career path, which is what Square One is doing, drive diversity and inclusion, looking forward to this report that's coming out through CADIA this week, invest in the innovation economy, lead in sustainable mobility, and leverage our pure Michigan assets. Absolutely, it's not that complicated. These are some of the things that we need to carry forward. So this is a call to action to you and an invitation. So these are 3 projects we're working on right now that you can get involved in. So first of all, if your company is not aware of a community that you're operating in, whether they have a Square One network team or not, please talk to us. So the Square One Pathway Pilot Project, and by the way, we're working very closely with Michigan Tech and Kettering on this project too. So that's a place to get involved. The second is UDrive, and I think you saw it today. Maddie, that helps lead that program, is out front, and there's a booth there. You can talk to them about that. But one of the things we're looking for is young influencers. They might be in your company or somebody you know that is living in Michigan, is growing their career in Michigan, and likes to live here and play here and work here and build a life here. And that's the stories we want to tell. And then lastly was that EV collaborative that we're all involved in. Many of the people from that collaborative are in the room today. You'll probably see their name badge. People from Leo, people from WIN, people from U of M EV Center. Get engaged with them too. Your company probably is, but if you're not, we'd like to get you engaged. So lastly, thank you to the sponsors, and another round of hand because they're paying for the drinks out back. And there's another group that are here today, and I'll close with this today. We have a handful of startups with us today, and you might have met some of them already today, and if you haven't, you'll see them. But they were sponsored by Comerica, Forvia, and Oakland Community College. A lot of them are over at Michigan Central, but they're not all at Michigan Central. But MICHauto is very committed to helping these companies become part of the network, be part of the community, be in the room like today, be invited to other executive events. So this is a really important group of companies because this is what will build the future for us. So please engage with them. And with that, thanks for being here today. Enjoy the networking, and we'll see you in a year here again. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, this concludes the program. Thank you for attending the 2023 MICHauto Summit, sponsored by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation
so much.
Office of Future Mobility and Electrification.
No, nobody did.